Okay, you're live.
Good evening, Stonecrest. The time now is 6:04, and I welcome you to our zoning update workshop. Today is December 3rd, 2020. Before we get started, let's do a few ground rules. And that is that this meeting was scheduled for an earlier date and it was rescheduled for today. And at one point in time, we said that we wanted the meeting to include stakeholders as well as constituents to have input on the meeting. And when this meeting was scheduled, a subsequent meeting was also scheduled. And that meeting was stated to involve homeowners, well, I believe to be stakeholders, constituents, and so forth. But from what I saw posted, it said that they're looking to meet with the HOA groups. So that kind of left a few of the other people out. But from my personal standpoint, I think it would benefit us all immensely to have input from some of the stakeholders this evening, as well as some of the HOAs if they're on the line, and some of the other stakeholders in the city of Stonecrest. And we've invited them to come on the line, but this is for the council. And as we desire input from other stakeholders, we will invite them to participate. And we're asking them to be as brief and succinct as they possibly can, such that it does not take away from what council is trying to gain this evening. So again, this is for city council to understand exactly where we're going and to work with the collaborative firm to move this process along, where we are open for input from constituents, stakeholders, HOAs who have been invited. So hold your comments and we'll try to get you in. But again, please be brief. And with that, Mr. Wheeler, are you going to start us off?
No, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. Like I said, Michelle is going to pretty much kind of go over the zoning update. Again, this you pretty much kind of covered most of it. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Again, the meeting scheduled for next Thursday is intended to have a conversation with the HOA presidents or leaders. They're the only stakeholder group that staff and the consultants have not met with to discuss the zoning update. But tonight's meeting again is to go in depth with council regarding the zoning update. And so you guys can give staff and the consultants understanding if we're on the right track when it comes to the zoning update. And with that, I'll hand over to Michelle as she will go through everything for us.
Well, before you go to Michelle, this is not a business meeting. This is a workshop. And we did not do a roll call, but I still would like to acknowledge council in attendance. So from Megan, will you do us the honor of
sure. Yes, sir, I will. Council member Jimmy Clanton.
I'm here, present.
Council member Rob Turner.
I'm here.
Council member Jasmine Cobble.
I'm here as well.
Council member and Mayor Pro Tem George Turner.
Here.
Council member Tammy Grimes.
She's muted, but she's here.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm sorry.
All right. And Mayor Jason Larry is absent from this meeting.
Thank you. Okay. Now,
all right, thank you.
Michelle, take it away.
Thank you so much. My name is Michelle Alexander. I'm the lead on behalf of the collaborative firm. Nicolette Washington is also on the line with us. She's a planner that has been working with us and with your staff all these months. We really appreciate the time. What I'm going through tonight is essentially the same document we've reviewed with all of the council individually and also in our last meeting. And we're pleased to have this added time to go through deliberately one step at a time and exchange thoughts and get feedback from you. So we really appreciate that. I'm going to share the screen if I'm allowed. I'm going to give it a whirl if I have permissions. So I have to wait to get permission, looks like. Good, thank you. All right, let's hope I get the right one here. And so hopefully you see that. Can someone give me a thumbs up? Do you see the Stonecrest beautiful sign? All right, thank you. So just to review the project, we're here to go into the substance. So I'm going to go through these first few slides kind of rapidly. We did this the last time, but I wanted to touch base, especially for viewers who weren't at some of the prior meetings. Essentially, we started this project during the period of last year. We spent the many months actually just doing some housekeeping kind of work, putting together the many amendments that the city had done after you became a city, and putting together the documents and meeting with staff to find out some of the issues that you were experiencing. And then we did a lot of analysis of your comprehensive plan and compared it against your zoning ordinance. After we took a look at that, we also met with your planning commission. We met with elected officials throughout the summer. And then we had meetings with the community. We met with folks from the Business Alliance, also folks from your industrial stakeholders. Arabia Mountain Alliance met with us a couple of times. We were appreciative of their time. Of course, like I mentioned, both economic development staff and planning development. And then when we had a large community meeting, we had about 130 people participate. I invite everyone to go to the city webpage. On the zoning update webpage, you'll see the presentation. I believe there's a video of the presentation as well. And then there's a series of questions and answers. It's about 8 pages. So we had a really great, intense back and forth and dialogue during that community meeting, which really helped inform the process. We did hear back some questions, some basics. Why were we updating the zoning ordinance in the first place? And to put it into context, this is over a 340-page document. So the zoning ordinance is a big set of rules, of regulations, and you essentially carried it over from DeKalb. But that document covered much more than what the city focuses on and what your city needs are, right? Because DeKalb County has a lot more geography and different development types. So we were asked to take a look at it and see what needed to be refined, how to improve some of the definitions, especially, and get some clarity on some of the language that is actually quite thick and difficult to navigate sometimes. And in fact, we heard that back from that community meeting. About a third of the people who have used your code, and this is from the residents and community members at that meeting, they reported to us that they had difficulty with it. It's not easy to use, it's difficult. So we're responding to that need. And a big question, how, is this going to affect our residential districts? And so residents were asking this, I understand. And it's a short answer, no. Nothing in your residential districts are going to be changed or recommended for impact, unless we hear back from you that you hear some needs, but that wasn't the intent. In fact, some of the things we were looking at was just meant to protect your neighborhoods a little bit better, at least given the feedback that we were given. So those are some of the key aspects of, why were we looking at updating the zoning ordinance and what you all asked us to do. But along the way, we were also asked to make sure we communicated some of the zoning constraints. We were asked to meet, as we did with the community meeting, and have some documents available on your webpage to kind of provide information that as a city, you have some constraints, that the zoning code and the zoning map that you all inherited, there are some legal constraints on there. And I know most of us, a lot of the new cities became a city to control your land use. With zoning, because of land use law, there are some things that are protected and that your hands are sort of tied. So we're trying to make sure we showed the map to your citizens at that community meeting and walk through so people aren't surprised. So they are more aware of what might be allowed by law on property next to them. So we tried to accomplish that. But diving right into some of the changes that we heard you wanted to address, a big one was notification. So we did not actually talk with you about this last time. We didn't propose anything. We heard back from you, almost all of the elected officials and many of the citizens asked for better notification, and was there a way to address our notification process in the code. So relating to rezonings, where we're recommending two updates. One, for zoning notification. Right now, when there's a rezoning, the surrounding properties within 250 feet receive a letter. And we were asked to look at best practices and increase that distance. We generated a little map there on the right to give you an indication of what 1,000 feet might look like. In this case, we just randomly picked the intersection of Evans Mill and Woodrow Drive. We figured that was a common known area for people's visualization. So to increase the distance to 1,000 feet, because you have so many large undeveloped properties, it makes a lot of sense to extend that 250. If we were more densely urbanized, 250 might be sufficient for contact and making folks aware of a rezoning. So we're recommending increasing up to 1,000. So that's one area we're asking you to consider.
Michelle,
Yes.
going along, or should we hold those to the end?
Say it again. I apologize. I couldn't.
Should we ask questions as you're going along, or should we hold them?
I think it's helpful to go ahead while we're going through it, because I was going to just pause at each slide and hear from you. Thumbs up, thumbs down, different directions. So fire away, if that's all right with your Mayor Pro Tem, of course. Sure.
Is that okay, Mayor Pro Tem? Is he on? Where'd he go?
I said, yes, please, go ahead. We're just doing a workshop.
Thank you. So one thing I wanted to ask in this area as far as notification is, as you very well know, we have, some areas where commercial, industrial, and residential butt up against each other. And sometimes there are residential communities that are within a mile or a mile and a half of a residential, industrial or commercial property. And obviously our current notification distance does not reach to those neighborhoods. However, that rezoning request is, within a mile of their home. So extending it to 1,000 feet, do we still accomplish being able to get to those residences that are near the commercial and industrial areas? Or can we consider a certain amount of miles versus feet? I probably could have did the calculation, and I apologize, but does 1,000 feet reach a half a mile, a mile? I just want to make sure that, especially around those industrial and commercial areas, that we're not just, stopping short of a residential community, knowing that we have quite a few pockets where those intersect or kind of butt up against each other. I would just hate to, reevaluate this number and then we still have stopped short of that residential community and that rezoning is literally right outside their door.
I'm not sure if Chris wants to jump in. I would say from the zoning and planning practice, the intent is really to contact those who are impacted. So if it's outside their door, then they will be within 1,000 feet. Me personally, I haven't ever seen that a mile would be considered. The thinking is once you get into a mile, that's really more of a neighborhood area. That's more of a general policy area impact. It wouldn't be impacting an individual neighbor. The idea is that a property is directly impacted. And if you're a mile away, you may experience the traffic from, say, a development a mile away, but your property is not impacted. And I think Anna Marie might
Yeah.
have a better answer on that from a legal standpoint.
So there are a couple things we want to think about when doing this. And the first one is that state law requires strict compliance with the zoning ordinance. So whatever you adopt has to be strictly complied with. So if there's any instance where, you know, there's a miscalculation or we missed one parcel or, you know, it takes a while to get notice to all those people because there are so many people, and that requires a lot of time and resources from the city's side. That can open up the city to possible litigation. And so we want to be cognizant of that. And then also, if we're saying, well, these people are possibly affected up to, you know, a mile, and we need to give them notice, that also could possibly open up who can sue the city based off of who the city feels like is impacted. So I would say there's a difference between what we put in the ordinance that we have to strictly comply with and possibly what we can do as a city as a courtesy because of the possible impact of the development.
The only thing it will, I mean, we can, 1,000 feet for a mile is not 1,000 feet. That's like 3,000 feet just from me doing quick calculations on the computer. The other thing that I guess what we're also experiencing is that some of our homeowners are not really not people who live in our city are not actually the homeowners. They may be renters. And when we do our mailing, we go based off the Texas Assessor's website. Even if we do send out we enlarging the scope of it, we still may actually be sending to the actual homeowner or the actual property owner instead of the person that actually lives there. So that's another issue that we may run across when we enlarging the scope. And second of all, just from a staffing standpoint, I mean that's if you hit a neighborhood, you may actually only be getting a third of the neighborhood, and you may actually not might get all of the neighborhood. Again, that proves to be sometimes complicated because some people may complain that, well, why did they get a notification instead of us getting a notification? So the idea that you want to immediately affect it because
So Peter, we're losing
those
you.
are the ones that immediately affected. I'm sorry.
We were losing part of what you said. Repeat the last thing you said.
Sorry. So for a more mass notification is the point of doing the legal organ and posting on the city's website, is because again you can get a whole you can advertise to the public instead of actually sending out an actual postcard to individuals. So I mean, it's the will of the city council, but those enlarging it does prove to have other certain challenges, unforeseen challenges that may occur. But again, I would say to back up Ms. Alexander's point that the initial point of doing a public notice card is for those immediately impacting the area instead of the general surrounding area. So
Let me also. Who's coming in?
No, you're fine. Go ahead. I'll wait.
Okay.
At some point, I would like to chime in as well.
Let me say that something we took away from the DeKalb County when we transferred to the city of Stonecrest was the community council. And the community council provided another avenue to get citizens' input prior to it coming to the city council. That is something that we might want to take another look at. And also you want to take a look at the signage. That is one thing that we improved, but maybe we need to improve it some more. The size of the signage prior to the city of Stonecrest was about the size of your average campaign sign, in some cases a lot smaller. And we did make it a lot larger, such that people who live in the general vicinity, riding past the property, could see the sign. But we probably want to take a look at making it even larger, just for consideration, to possibly make it even larger, such that there's no way to miss it, that the property is going to go through some type of a change, or there's a request to change the zoning on the property.
If I may, to that signage point, when I was at the City of Atlanta, they made a significant change to their signage that was actually extremely helpful, where each different type of zoning request was a different color. So like rezoning, tree removal, special exception was a different color. And then there was a very big letter. So there was a very, very large Z on the sign for rezoning and a very large S on the sign for a special exception. And so that when you're driving down the street, you can kind of already know what they are asking for based off of the color and the big letter. And that proved to actually really help with notification in the City of Atlanta.
Okay, Councilwoman Cobble, I think you were trying, I'm sorry, was it Clanton or Cobble?
I can yield to Cobble because you can, until she.
We haven't heard from you, Mr. Clanton. I have to yield to you. We have not heard from you.
All right, then that's great. So my input would be this. I agree that the 1,000 feet is great. It's a good start, and I think it's much better than what we have now. However, I do think in certain zoning cases, we may want to consider just on a zoning type basis. For instance, if you're going from M to M2, I think the notification perimeter should certainly be larger because the impact could be larger. So when we're talking about regular zoning, the 1,000 feet would probably accomplish whatever it is we want to do. It would take away the liability issues. But then when we move from M, for instance, as an example, to M2, then we may want to make certain that a larger arena of our community knows about that so that we can have impact from a larger segment of the population. So everybody don't drive by these areas, so they may or may not see the signs, but I'm certain that if we had a business or particularly in the industrial park or something that goes up that would cause some type of odors that may not be environmentally harmful, but the odor itself is just agitating, that our communities may want to know about that. So I think that's something that we might want to consider just on a zoning type basis.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Cobble, I mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. I was actually saying, I like what Anna Marie was saying about changing the signs a little bit. That actually sounds like a really good idea. And also, I mean, my point of that question, and I actually like your recommendation, Councilman Clanton, where we may need to look at it, maybe not as an overall distance for 1,000 feet for every zoning, but to look at it segmented like you suggested. And that leads to kind of why I asked that question, because for an example, if we remember from our last council meeting, and we had a rezoning and we pulled up, we were trying to, determine, I think we were using 150 feet for the property owners, and it didn't reach outside of, the industrial park, but there was a school within a mile and there was residential within a mile. And, so in areas where we do know that the use can impact the residents, even if they're not what the law typically is considering a direct impact, an indirect impact, I guess could be, viewed as equally as impactful to those residents. And, I just want to make sure that we're covering all of our bases, especially in those scenarios where, right outside of that industrial park, there is community all around it. So the use could very well impact those residents. And if we continue to limit the distance where it doesn't reach them, we're still having those concerns as we're thinking through approval or not. We're thinking about everybody and all the impacts. So I think we should talk through that a little bit more and see how difficult that would be to take Councilman Clanton's suggestion and look and see what zonings we could extend that distance for to make sure we cover all the bases.
That's why this is called a workshop. Someone else was trying to get in. I didn't recognize the voice.
You don't recognize my voice, Councilman?
No. I heard someone else. I heard the male voice. Well, I guess.
Oh, I was going to say something. Oh, I didn't do it though.
No, please. It's a workshop, but it's still formal.
I was going to say something, but I'll let Councilwoman Grimes.
Councilwoman Grimes, go ahead.
That probably was the voice.
I just really wanted to say I really like what Anna Marie said about the color piece, because I am so visual. Because I was about to say before you said different colors for different types, to say put the neon piece on so that even at night, for those persons who may work at night, may not be out in the day, they know something was going on with that property. But I like the different color piece, and maybe we could see about having some type of reflection on the sign. I think what you said, Councilman Clanton, I think that hits pretty much on the head what I know has been a concern of mine since listening to some of these zoning issues, the different types that affect the different people and how far they are from. So I really like those two. So Ms. Michelle, please make sure you hear those two loud and clear. I co-sign both of those.
Councilman Rob Turner.
Yeah, I was going along with Councilman Clanton in reference to what he was saying, because I think it should be some variable footage possibly in reference to the notices. If there's schools around, if there's churches, if there are other activities, I think those areas or those institutions should be considered when we're sending out information. It might be 1,050 feet or whatever, but I think we should look at the communities that we're looking at changing zoning or bringing businesses in or whatever, and see how it would affect in reference to the close proximity of other communities or other activities or businesses that can be affected by.
Okay. Any other comments on that subject? Okay, then we're back to Ms. Alexander.
Yes, thank you. I will want to just triple check again with the city attorney on the due process side and treating all applicants the same. So to the degree we can differentiate, that makes sense. I hear exactly why. I mean, that makes imminent sense how you're proposing it. Sounds very smart. I worry though, putting on, I'm not the economic development person, but putting on my business hat of, wow, if it's a smaller business and they are not having impactful, but they happen to be a light industrial use, are we opening them up to barriers of, proceeding with investing in a new business? So I'm wondering if some of it is more scale than necessarily use. So that's just an initial thought, not to decide it now, but those are some of the things I'd be considering as I put together and think with your city attorney ways to respond to your great suggestions.
May I add a bit? The thing about that, what you just said, is that you got to remember when we talk about the industrial park, we're talking about, particularly when you're talking about M's and M2s, you're talking typically about industrial park type businesses, and just by definition they are separated from the rest of the city, so they already have, they learn to live with where they're placed, and so we have to make certain that we continue along that veil. So it's not really a stretch to say that in the industrial park or when we're talking about M's and M2s as an example, that's not really in my opinion, I don't think that's putting them in a different pot than anybody else, other than where they already at. So typically that's the whole point with setbacks, boundaries, and the like, and the zoning itself.
Sure, fair enough. Well, so that was one change that we're going to be drafting to bring to you, and we'll respond to the comments, and we appreciate that direction. I'll probably do some bubble maps to give a better sense of what that means. I tried to give just a quick reference here, but I think it'll be better to show a bigger corridor and with some specific examples. I think that Councilwoman Cobbles, your comment about visualizing that prompts that added visual. For number 2, you see on the screen, this speaks to the point you were making, how in DeKalb there were some other features in the code about how to allow public interaction prior to the public hearing. And so we were recommending you consider having the neighborhood meeting. So in DeKalb, it's required that an applicant host a community meeting on their own prior to submitting an application. The thought being, let the community tell you ahead of time whether this is a go, no go, essentially. Or, you can get feedback as an applicant of the direction you need to go to strengthen your application through the public hearing process. So this was a consideration for you to add to your notification that you require your applicants to conduct, that are rezoning applicants, that they conduct a neighborhood meeting. And that they would, they'll take their attendance and they'll make sure they capture the comments and that they include that with their submittal, their application submittal. If that sounds like
Michelle, let me ask you a question about that. So, let me ask you two questions. One, help me with my memory. We require a community meeting for which applications today?
So you do a community meeting for rezoning and special land use permits. You do not have to do a community meeting before you submit your application. You have to have your community meeting prior before you go in front of the planning commission and city council.
Okay,
so what Michelle is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilman.
Now so you have to have the meeting before the planning commission, not before the application is submitted. So the recommendation, that's the difference, and the recommendation is to bump that up.
Yeah, so before you actually submit your application, you'll go ahead and have a community meeting and you'll submit the results to staff prior to submitting your application. What I'm thinking as well is before you submit, you go ahead and identify your community meeting place where you want to hold it. Give it to, I did let staff know, so therefore they can let their council person or each district know of it. Therefore they can post it on their social media page, so they are aware of it. Kind of a saying of just to be aware of it as it goes along through the process and so forth. Because again, we want to make sure that the community is well aware of the application before it gets to council, so they can voice their opinions on it.
Okay, great. That's exactly where I was going. So you answered that for me. I wanted to see if we were writing that portion in the requirement, but I guess that's not technically going to be in the code. The recommendation is to just make it so that the community meeting is prior to the application. And then I guess the results of it will be in the application packet. But a part of that requirement is to notify the city of when that community meeting is. And then I guess just an SOP for the city is you all will notify the council members when you have been notified of that community meeting, but that essentially becomes a part of their application packet. Am I following that correctly?
Yeah, so once they let us know that when they are having a community meeting, staff will give them, a notification as well, a sheet pretty much confirming the dates, date of submittal, date of planning commission, date of city council, and date of the date of the community meeting. So again, so everybody's aware of when the community meeting was happening, when the commission meeting will be taking place, and city council meeting will be taking place as well. Staff will sign, date, stamp it, and so forth, and all that, and then forward over to the corresponding district. So each council person is aware of that, so they can let the constituents know if they want to attend the meeting or not attend the meeting, and so forth.
And this is administrative.
I'm sorry, who else is on the line?
Sorry.
I think that's Michelle talking, but we're losing her a little bit.
I don't know why there's feedback.
Okay. Well, before you
I
move
was
on,
going to state that this isn't this is not currently in the code, though. This is a practice. This is an administrative practice. So the recommendation is that it goes into the actual ordinance itself.
okay.
Yes. In the code itself, it says that if an incomplete application, if the application is incomplete, therefore it's rejected, and therefore it's been failed. So therefore, we want to kind of make it streamlined by including this into the code and saying that it has to be complete. If not, then it'll be automatically rejected, and therefore they have to reapply again and so forth.
That's why the community council, and with the community council, it becomes a standing community meeting, let's say if it's every third Wednesday, then that becomes a target that all applicants and all citizens can aim for, to know that whatever is coming has got to go past the community council, and they can plan on it happening at a specific time, and they can make plans to be present. So just something to consider, and not a community council per district. We just have one community council for the whole city. So just an idea that I would like to keep on the table.
I have a question.
Councilwoman Cobble, is that you? You can still kind of gobble.
It's Councilwoman
Okay.
Grimes.
Councilwoman Graham. Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Do something about that audio.
Yeah, it's bad. It's okay. I was just wondering, when an applicant makes the application, how much time right now do they have before they have to notify the community? What are we at right now?
So technically it's a 3-month process. So they literally have, so they're supposed to notify within 2 weeks of the community meeting that they're scheduled. So right now they're just supposed to just give a draft of how they're going to send out a notification. And there's really not a time frame required in the code. It's just that standard operating procedures right now is just you have to do 2 weeks to give everybody enough time. That's why I tell everybody before you need to notify everybody within 2 weeks of your community meeting to give everybody enough time to rearrange and so forth. With COVID now, it's pretty much still the same summer format, but now it's pretty kind of like a week's time or so forth. But right now it's just 2 weeks is what I ask people to give. Usually what I found out to be sometimes an issue is that they may have their meeting way advanced of the planning commission meeting. And then you'll have people come out and then they forget to show back up for the planning commission meeting, and they just are kind of unaware. So I try to do the 2 weeks prior to the planning commission meeting within that month, so that everybody's still fresh in the minds to show back up again, because some people may show up and then they'll forget about the planning commission meeting and city council. So that 2 week mark tends to be a good enough length of time to remind everybody to come show back up again, if they want to show up again.
So let me ask you then, Mr. Wheeler, do you think with the recommendations that you have right here on the table, could we be a little more specific with what you just said about the meeting and the notification? Could we, what you just said, could we put that in the recommendation as well so
Yes,
that
ma'am.
it's clear?
No,
So
yes,
that-
yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
this
'cause I
just summarized the direction. What you see here is the bullet points. So, but yes, Chris has detailed that what you're talking about as an SOP, those very specific
Mhm.
requirements.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
may I? This is Councilman Clanton.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement with the community council, but particularly since you said that it would just be one community council for the entire city as opposed to 5 different ones, and I think that's a good idea. But here's where this is my input for that: is that those community council meetings would not be a weighted meeting, meaning that they're mostly for just information and input back and forth, but they're not. They would not be considered on the council level when it comes to the decision making. And the reason I say that is because we have a weighted meeting, or should be weighted. I don't know if they really are actually weighted in the eyes of council now, but it should be. When it goes to community planning, that should be a weighted meeting. In other words, what comes out of the community planning should be taken into consideration by city council, as well as we have another weighted event is the staff recommendations, which is based on, their understanding and their knowledge of our zoning laws, procedures, and policies and ordinances. So therefore, that becomes a weighted meeting. So we have a weighted event with the community planning. We have another weighted event with our staff recommendation, and then it comes before city council. And the three of those should, help us come to a conclusion as to what's the next step in regards to approving, disapproving, or whatever action we take regarding the zoning issue, because we're talking about zoning at this particular time. But with the community council on zoning issues, I think it should just really be a matter of, it should be an opportunity for us to get information and make certain that the community have an opportunity to know about these events, about these zoning or rezoning applications, and also for us, for the city to have record of the community's input that is not managed by the applicant. Because, when you have that managed by the applicant, you have one person. I mean, I don't know the effort that they would put into that, but I think if we did it from the city's point of view with using our marketing ability, I think we can make certain that the news get out at least, and it'd be a good starting point.
Community councils are usually not binding groups in terms of their opinions. It's just that it sets up an avenue for the general public to know that on a regular basis, there will be a meeting, and usually at a standard location, that they can have their voices heard on items that are coming before the planning commission and before the city council. And it just, no one can say that, well, we didn't know about it. Well, if you have a couple of members from each district that are on the community council, we kind of expect them to help notify the community as well as the city council members to notify the community of events that are coming before city council and the planning commission before it happens. So they don't get caught by surprise and not knowing that a certain development has been proposed, because it will have been heard before the city council. Will have been heard before the community council, your planning commission, and when it comes to city council, everyone should have already heard of it and have had a chance to have at least minimum input.
And we're on the same page.
Okay.
Oh, one thing to consider potentially is if the community council serves, you have one, and it serves essentially the same function as planning commission, is they're making a recommendation, they just don't have an official public hearing. You might lose what community meeting, which is close, is right there. It's supposed to be held in the neighborhood, versus a community council where your constituent may have to travel outside, a little further to some designation.
Well, if you're comparing this to what we had in the county, then this community council would be probably 1/5 the size of the one we had in the county. So I think, considering the size of the city, one council could be centrally located and probably could serve the entire city, in opposed to what you had at the county, where you had 5 to serve, how many people? That's 750,000 people. Whereas here you're having one council to serve 50,000 people. So it'll be a lot smaller than what you had with some of the ones with the county. And this kind of doubles as a community meeting, and it is not binding whatsoever. It is just a chance for them to dialogue and get some understanding as to what is being proposed and give some feedback.
This would be.
I'm sorry. I think that might require us looking into it a little bit deeper. If there's just going to be one community council to represent the city and not individual neighborhoods, but we can look at that.
I was gonna say the same thing, because
they're not normally in neighborhoods. They've been district. I never knew of them in the county. And Councilman Mayor Tim Turner may speak to that, but they wasn't like, they didn't move to neighborhood from neighborhood to neighborhood. They was just in a location like the one I attended was normally in libraries, and they served those communities very well. And again, I mean, the key thing that we have to consider here is that they are not binding. These are, and that's my whole point, was as long as they are not weighted, that there was no binding issues regardless, then that was great, because they basically do replace more the neighborhood meeting, and they are not a duplications of the community planning group, which is totally different, you know. So
Well, the only decision that can be binding is a decision of council and mayor, and so
Right.
they can't be binding, nor is a planning commission binding. But by neighborhoods, I just meant that, like, for example, other cities have neighborhood representation, and so the neighborhoods meet as a group, and then they provide a non-binding recommendation to the planning commission. The planning commission provides a non-binding recommendation to the city council. And so we would just need to explore how the community, the makeup of the community meeting is different from the makeup of the planning commission and how they serve a different purpose. Because otherwise we would just be duplicating the planning commission.
Yeah.
It's something that can happen. We could talk about it further offline if you'd like, but we would just need to make sure that there's a clear line and a clear difference between the planning commission and the community council meeting. And I only say that because in the ordinance, there's a required public hearing to the planning commission. And if the community council and the planning commission are indistinguishable, then that might require some other notice requirements for those meetings.
I hear what you're saying, but I think that it is distinct in terms of the roles of the community council versus the planning commission. And yes, we probably can talk about it more offline and do a little more research, but I think that that will be distinct, and it gives a standard or standing opportunity to know when these meetings are going to occur, and people can plan better to attend on a regular basis. And I think it will be driven by whichever community the proposal is coming out of as to who will most probably attend. So I think you'll get the same effect of having a community meeting based on where the project is proposed or what is being proposed.
Yeah, and to our, as far as our ordinances and requirements goes, and whatever policies or SOPs we're following, then my only thing would be is that legally, could we not replace the neighborhood meetings with the council, community council meetings?
Yeah.
And have that as the first step, and then just totally get rid of the neighborhood meetings. And then, and it would serve the same purpose as the neighborhood meetings. And then that information would be brought to the planning commission.
Yeah.
I would. That's what I thought. That's what I thought the recommendation was not to continue to have the applicant, not to continue to require the applicant to have its or he or she their own meeting, but to replace that requirement with the community council meeting. So that's where their community meeting would be, and should, you know, when they get on that agenda, then they have satisfied that requirement for the application.
Yes.
Okay.
Just for clarity, are you all saying that the community council meeting is simply just a meeting where the neighborhood gets together with the developer, or is there an actual body which would consist of the community council and there'd be specific people on that body?
Well, I would think that it would be led by a body of at least one representative from each district to make up that body. And then anyone else who wants to participate from the community can come out and participate.
But to expand on that a little bit, I don't think we should make it like a group that requires a forum. So because you know, some of these you will be talking about one event, one rezoning event, and it's in a particular community. And, you know, so I don't think, you know, even though it should be a group of 5, I agree with that, but it should not require a forum, and it should be chaired by whoever is present. And that, in particular, the council representative or the district representative should probably be the chair, so it will rotate. So I mean, you know, it's maybe this is not done anywhere else in the country, but you know, I think it's a good idea, and it may become a standard for the rest of the country.
Council, I just wanted just to be clear from a staff standpoint. So the community council meeting will replace the neighborhood meeting, and the community meeting, the city council. Council community meeting will be represented by each district, by a district representative, correct? And then therefore, if anybody from the community, I'm sure from the city, can attend the meeting as well. Is that what you guys are saying?
Absolutely.
The same rules
Okay.
that are now existing for the neighborhood meeting.
Okay, so I guess what staff is trying to understand is how is that different than from planning commission, because planning commission is represented by each district by one representative. And so what you're getting is duplicating what the planning commission is doing. So again, staff is trying to distinguish what is the difference between the planning commission meeting and then the community meeting.
Well,
You're represented by one district, by each district, you're doing the same thing as the planning commission meeting. So again, even though each chair can rotate, it's still being represented by each district. So I'm just wanting to be clear that what you guys are asking us.
the planning commission doesn't satisfy the community meeting requirement from the developer. Not unless there's a way to connect that to the planning commission. What we're trying to do is have one or two, but an organized event where the community meeting that's required from the developer happens at one time that month or twice that month, but where there's some organized event where the developer's requirement to have a community meeting is not individualized for each development. So as the planning commission, you have to have the community meeting before you come before the planning commission. So not unless there's a way to tie the community meeting requirement to the planning commission, we're trying to distinguish between the two so that the community meetings held by the developers are organized and where there's one central location where everybody can come and they're notified of whatever development is trying to come to that particular district. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have, this kind of roller coaster ride of who knows about the community meeting and when, and have they satisfied that requirement. And it just, it's just a roller coaster ride. So we're just trying to organize that community meeting requirement.
Right.
So if you can figure out a way to
I can talk to that.
Not required. The community meeting is not required by state law. So if you want to collapse all of that into the planning commission, you can just take it out of your order.
No, we don't want to do that. I don't think that's what we're aiming to collapse that. We want that input from the community. What we're trying to do is expand upon it so that we can ensure that the community has an opportunity to chime in at a level that is, in this case, facilitated by the city of Stonecrest to a certain degree. So, all we're doing is asking for a centralized place to facilitate the neighborhood meetings. That's it.
We have done that in the past.
If the community meeting is facilitated by the city of Stonecrest, then there are a lot of legal constraints around that meeting.
We've done that in the past prior. I'm sorry, Emily.
I'm sorry. If the community meeting is facilitated by the city of Stonecrest and the members are appointed by the city of Stonecrest, just because we call it a community meeting doesn't mean that we don't have to follow the Open Meetings Act requirement, and doesn't mean we can't follow the zoning procedures law. And so there's still going to be constraints around quorum and around notice.
The county already do this?
But
Yes.
I can't speak to what the county does. But if there is a board that is one person represents each district and it's appointed by people at the city, then we have to follow the Open Meetings Act. And if it's related to zoning, we have to follow the zoning procedures law.
So
I'm bringing that up just to say that, there obviously is a way to do it because the county is doing it already. So if there are requirements that, Open Meetings has to follow, then, there's already a blueprint because the county's been doing the community council meetings for years. So we're really just asking to kind of adopt that model, make it fit Stonecrest, but, it's not a brand new model. It's obviously one that's been exercised well throughout the years. So we're just trying to figure out how to take that model and utilize it to best suit the citizens of Stonecrest. So it's not. Well,
if I may, that model is not one. There's not I don't understand it as there's one community council for the whole county. There are community councils for different portions of the county, which make it different. If there are different neighborhood meetings for different neighborhoods in the city, then that's not the same thing as the planning commission, which is one meeting for the whole city. And I think that's the difference, where there might have been one community council meeting for DeKalb County that represented the city of Stonecrest. That was not the sole council for the whole county. And so that makes a difference.
So you're saying that if we have two community councils in the city of Stonecrest, that would satisfy the
If you have two neighborhood meetings and the requirement is, hey, city of Stonecrest, we're creating neighborhood A and neighborhood B. And then you guys need to have a meeting and send us your bylaws, and that's it. And the council and the city is not, the council and the city is not necessarily involved in constituting that board, then that's something different than the planning commission, where one person represents each district and the council and the city is responsible for appointing each person on that council or that board.
Interesting.
And I mean, I'm happy to discuss further offline or draft a memo or whatever you all need to do, but I just want you to understand the difference.
Now we're trying to tell you to make it legitimate, but we know what we want to get done. So if you can assist with making it legitimate, that we don't have any negative ramifications of doing what we're trying to achieve here. And that is to give the public a chance to have input on these proposals and give the applicant a chance to meet with the public prior to coming to the planning commission.
Attorney, do you believe then that we can put something together that would not be a conflict to the planning committee and something that can also benefit the needs and desires we have to get communication out?
Sure, I could definitely put something together that would offer a suggested way to go about that.
Okay.
And so I can be useful in as your city attorney works on that. Just to clarify, the intent is you don't want to have a neighborhood meeting where the notice is there and posted on the property and applicants get letters directly affected in a certain area. Instead of that, you want a regularly held city council, community council meeting to serve as that meeting and at one specific location all the time. And so the notice for that and you want people from the whole city to chime in about that particular project, even though it's on a certain part of town. You want one.
That's not what I'm saying. No, what I'm saying.
I don't think that's what any of us are saying.
Hold on, where are we now? Mr. Councilmember Clanton, please.
Okay, what I'm saying, just to be clear, is that what we want is the same process in place now. The only thing different we're talking about is place. So now the neighborhood would still get the same notice, the same 1,000 feet, or, in the particular cases, if we go to the larger locations for M to M2s, then the same notification will be put out in the same area, but the location place would be a definitive place, so they would know where to go. We would post it same as we post it now. So if we went to the neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2, we can have North Stonecrest, everything above I-20, and South Stonecrest, if you want to, everything below I-20. But the point is that it will still be the same neighborhood meeting, just in a different place, the same process.
Mr. Wheeler.
Yes. So prior to COVID, staff had already we're already having neighborhood meetings at City Hall because, again, staff found that they were having issues finding a location to host these community meetings throughout the city. So since most of the meetings were already at City Hall, such as Planning Commission and the City Council meetings, staff decided that the community meeting was going to be held in the City Hall chambers. The neighborhood meeting was going to be posted on the city's website and also on social media to inform them that a neighborhood meeting was going to occur. The issue, again, about having different areas throughout the city is that even now it's hard to find locations to host large gatherings of people. Most of the locations people try to do at the Stonecrest Library, but that was hard because of what time they close and other things. Some even try to have the Blue Walker Center and so forth. Staff thought it was easier just have it at City Hall, and that everybody could just know that you got to come back there for Planning Commission, so you got to come back there for City Council. So staff would already suggest that we keep doing with the model that we've already started working on, is by having the community meeting here at City Hall, and then staff keeps putting it on the city's website and social media to inform individuals of the community meeting. But the public, but the notice and cards and so forth will still go out to those within 1,000 feet and so forth.
Who chaired that committee? I mean, who chaired that meeting?
That meeting is held by the applicant, but staff is there present to be there to take notes, individually notes, so that we can listen to what their community concerns as well. Staff would be present always at the community meeting at the time.
So the organizer of it would be your staff.
Well, the organizer is going to be the applicants, but we're just hosting a space for them. Again, we're not the applicant, so the meeting is going to be for the applicant. It's just a central location for them to host the meeting, and then they can have a one-on-one dialogue with the community. Again, staff is just there for technical analysis and so forth. So again, we would be there taking notes regarding just the outcome of it, but then that meeting is purely for the applicant to have a dialogue with the applicant with the community.
I don't want to spend the whole evening on this particular item, but we do need to deal with it. So maybe we can talk more about it offline. But that is a concern, and I hear the rest of the council saying that they would support having something on a regular basis that is a little more formal than just waiting for the applicant to decide that they want to have a community meeting and we find them a place. So we could talk about it more offline, unless someone is really burning to press this some more. We'll move on. Okay, we'll come back to it later. I'm sorry, Council.
In terms of like, you have if it's set at, there's nothing that stops that meeting that's currently happening to be set at a specific date and time. So sounds like you're halfway there. The other notification issue that came up with almost all of the elected officials on your interviews, how do we get it, what's a way to have notification when the property's already entitled, but we don't like being surprised when something comes in that's impactful. You already have, actually, staff was pointing out that there is already a report that is updated. I just replaced or put up here just for reference for folks who may not be aware of that on the webpage, you can go to this portal, and on that portal, you can see any of the permits that have been pulled for that week. You can generate reports. I don't know if Chris wants to expound any more on that, but it's an existing tool.
Yeah, so I mean, Citizen Serve is basically where, again, is where all our online permitting is housed for variances, land use, for LDPs, to plats, to building permits, plumbing, business license, and so forth. The portal, again, is to serve the public. For those who are interested in what may be occurring in their area, they can go to the website and then look. They can choose to see if, say, a contractor is working in your neighborhood and you want to know if they pulled a permit. You can click on and see if they pulled a permit or not. Same thing if you see some bulldozers maybe going on, see if there is a rezoning or LDP in the works for it. So again, the portal is housed, is right there for people to use. Again, we actually did a workshop last year with each department to explain this. We hosted out in the City Hall meeting for those who may have questions about looking about the online portal because we had decided we wanted to go to more online route. We did one. I'm sure I can be able to find those again. I believe City Council was notified of the online tutorials that we held, not last year, but I think 2018. I believe we had it 2018, 2019. But I'm sure I can find those again and send those out to you as each department had a breakdown of how to look up their permits and also how to apply for one as well online. So.
Chris, how soon is that submitted to the Citizen Serves portal? When a person
It's updated. It's once you submit an application, it automatically is already uploaded. So
So
again,
if we want to find something in our community, we just can just go to this portal at any point in time and see it.
yes, sir. You'll see if the permit has been pulled for this location. Again, so we are, unfortunately, it's not detailed as far as having maps or anything like that. It just lets you know if a permit has been pulled. The citizen service is limited in that, so you will have to do an open record request, but you can see exactly what's actually being applied, and usually they'll have the permit, and then I believe the person who applied for it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a pretty powerful tool, and not every city has that automated or available, or to the public, the general public, that you can access a report and see what permits have been requested in a given period. But that that requires a person taking that step to seek it out. So there is.
Let me just say that maybe I'm the only one who hadn't done the tutorial, but I found it very difficult to get to it. So perhaps once I go through the tutorial again, it'll be made a whole lot easier. But that's something to consider, the ease of the use of it.
Sure, that makes sense. And sometimes some cheat sheets and guides can help and go a little bit can go a long way sometimes with instruction.
Okay.
So that's important to know if you're finding barriers. What's another way to alert about permits without, I would say, unduly burdening an applicant? And I say that because when you have investors, especially if you have small businesses or small property owners, adding any time to the process can really add cost and maybe create a barrier to investment. So we always try to balance those, both sides of it. So one thing we're proposing for you to consider is to do instead of requiring all permits, how can we have a criteria? What's a trigger that would alert and say, this is something the community will want to know about. This is something that people will be affected by and we should facilitate and get information out. Or as an elected official, I don't want to be surprised but I don't want to see every sign permit. So where's that balance? So we are proposing, there are communities that use what they call a development of community impact, that it's big enough. It's not big enough to be a regional impact. It's not big enough for transportation or traffic studies, but it's big enough that it's going to impact us. And we want to take an extra eye on it. And we want people to be aware of it. It's simply a notification. However, so just to be clear, it's it's informing the community that a permit is asked to be pulled. And we're recommending a threshold of say 20,000 square feet. So it's something in between, a medium and larger size impact, or it would capture something if it's a 2-acre size parcel that's going to have activity on it. Maybe it's not a building that's 20,000 square feet, but because of the size of the acreage, it may be an impact that you want to have awareness about. And it would be pretty simple. It would require that the applicant post a sign explaining the project. It would also require letters of notification to immediate properties within, we're recommending just a 500 feet area of the project, but maybe you do it coincident with the size of the project, the distance notification. So this is non-legislative. This means it's not going before council. It's not a public hearing. It's simply a transparency. We want our community to have more avenues of information. And so we wanted you to think about if that might meet the needs I heard you voicing.
So Michelle, this is for by right use?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, this is something that's not that they're by right. They're entitled to. The zoning allows them to do it, but especially when it's those several acres of woods that people don't want to be surprised seeing the trees come down. How can we notify and help also you as elected officials be aware of things that are coming in the pipeline, even if there's even though they may meet all the technical requirements. It's still what I heard you say you wanted. is some public notification.
Michelle, make a point, and I've spoken to Chris about this on another occasion. I like surprises, but I don't like surprises. And what I mean by that is that I don't like the community to know something's coming or something's happening in my district before I do. So I requested that every permit that's going on in my district, this is my requirement, that what does it cost? Is it a little more problematic with that to send me that, Chris, every permit that has been, application that's gone up in my district for me to see it? So I can personally inform my constituents of what's happening and have some type of knowledge before it's a surprise to them.
Yes, sir. I mean, I try to do that all the time. I try to any type of. I'm not gonna lie. I've been inundated with other items. So again, I would try to rearrange the planning duties in the department to make it more easy for me to start notifying you guys again of developments that are going on in the city. I know you did it previously, but I know I fell off doing that, so I apologize. So I will start sending those notifications out to you guys. Probably, I think it was on a weekly basis, or it may have been every other, or maybe a 2-week basis. But I'll get back to doing that again.
I would appreciate it. Thank you.
So Michelle, to that point, it's usually the by right use that we're surprised with, right? Obviously for rezonings and SLUPs, we typically, know about those because of the process. So I know Chris said that he will, agree to, send the notifications out to the council members. And that's fantastic. I'm just thinking of, in 20 years when Chris is not there, how can we make it so that, we've codified somewhere, and maybe the zoning ordinance is the right place, maybe it's not, but where, the council is still notified of these by right uses that are coming into the community without depending on, kind of the director to agree to do that in his or her time. Where that is what is considered a common practice or a rule or policy for us, is that even though we've given this recommendation, which I think is fantastic, that will notify the community about what's changing in their by right use, but how do we make it so that also the council member is continue to be made aware of that without, relying on, just to make sure that through the changing of directors that remains to be a part of the process.
So that sounds to me, you want to make sure it is a practice, it's a reporting practice that you want institutionalized. So beyond any individual person. So I wouldn't speak to that in the zoning ordinance. I wouldn't put in reporting requirements in the zoning ordinance. To me, those would be more internal policy requirements, but I'd punt to your city manager, and we can follow back up, Chris and I, about how to institutionalize those practices.
But Michelle, can I
go ahead, Councilman Clanton.
Michelle, can I say this in regards to the addressing it in the ordinances? I mean, in a way we do, I guess. If you look at permit notification that you guys mentioned up there in Citizen Serve, most of these events will show up in Citizen Serve. So technically it's out there, at least if council have to go look for it themselves, we're able to do that. But what we want to make certain of, though, is that extracted from there is any land disturbance, because that's what we're talking about generally. Even though it's by right use, but we're looking at land disturbance that I'm getting feedback for some reason. But anyway, land disturbances that should be maybe distributed to council through some other means, as I guess like you said, a standard operating process or procedure that is part of maybe this, not the city managers, but our planning manager's role.
That's precisely what I wanted to say, Councilman Clanton, and that is that the land disturbance permit is a trigger, because I understand that land disturbance permit is good for a year, I believe. But traditionally, they don't wait that long before they actually start work. But whenever there's a request for a land disturbance permit, one is issued, then we know what is about to happen. And if that could be sent to council, it would be a great notification that something is about to happen.
Yeah. And so, since this is we are also talking with Ken Hildebrand for the process of existing processes for land disturbance. So those were the comments about notification or responses to what we heard from you all about desire to expand your notification, at least as far as the zoning ordinance is concerned. Another area that we have looked at was what, and you've heard me say it a couple times now, we compared what your zoning map looked like, what those zoning districts, how they compared to your future land use map. And again, on the right-hand side, these larger colors, this is the general policy. This is adopted and approved in your comprehensive plan. There's maybe 10, 11 different categories. On your left-hand side is the zoning map, your current zoning map. In your zoning code, you have about, with the overlays, there's like 35 or 37 different zoning districts. So see all these colors on the right-hand side, we're transferring that over, and these are the same colors up here. So on the top, you see the categories from your future land use map. And we're assigning what is the right zoning that would be appropriate in those areas. So we're matching up your policy with your zoning. And that's sort of a, in a way, sort of a housekeeping matter of getting that into your zoning code, because that needed to be updated. One thing we wanted to point out is you have 3 different categories of what we call activity centers. So one center is your neighborhood center, you have your city center, your regional center. They're pretty intuitive, right? Neighborhood is the least, lower scale, city center, a little more intense. And regional, of course, is really where your mall is, right? It's a regional destination. And I cut off the head of the city so to focus in a little bit where these colors are primarily located. So this is your future land use map. On the right-hand side is where the red is, where your regional scale is. This funny pink, hot pink, darker pink along I-20 is where your city scale is identified. And then this darker kind of red, burnt colored neighborhood scale, that's up here. There's an example of it up here in the northern part of the city. So those are 3 different policy areas. That's in your code. And they identify what kind of density is appropriate. You're saying that's where you want your density to concentrate. You don't want it in the rest of the city. You really want it concentrated in these 3 different areas. Well, right now you actually have 5 different zoning districts. So you have 5 zoning districts that address the kind of mixed use you want, but they don't coincide directly with those 3 categories. So we were just recommending, not changing the substance, but really recommending you consolidate, instead of having 5 different ones with a whole bunch of gradations, allowing that neighborhood scale or that city scale or that regional scale, have those be your mixed use districts, that they coincide with those 3 instead of having 5. Again, it's not a substantive change, it's consolidating so it's easier to use and easier to read, if that makes sense to you, because there's a way to then just one-to-one correspond. Currently, it's hard to know because you haven't really been able to test your mixed use district. Same with your HR districts, your high density residential. You have them on the books, but you have as an option, but you haven't had cases come through to really test, how these are working for you or not. But we were anticipating to make it as easy as possible when somebody does come, if that makes sense. And if you'd like to see that, that's what we were doing.
So I have a question here, Michelle.
Please.
Can you educate me a little bit more on, I guess, how the mixed use districts are utilized within the neighborhood scale, city scale, and regional scale? Like help me understand, give me a scenario. I guess, how does it,
Yeah. And it's a density question. So an MU1, your mixed use, low density, so say it's the density is only 8 units to the acre. A mixed use 2 is you could get up to 12 units to the acre. A mixed use 3, you're capped at 24 units to the acre. So what caps these is a density ceiling. So anytime an applicant comes to you and they say, I want to do a mixed use project, and you say, great, come invest in our city, but what you going to do? And then they'll pick what district, and you'll say, I don't know, let me check our adopted policy. Does our map say that's the project we want there? And if you have it too low, if you only have if you have something that's too low, but your map is actually saying you want to have higher density, then you kind of are leaving up this gap between what you say you really want and for those zoning district, or excuse me, for that area of the city. So this would just make it a little easier. So MU1, going back to your original question, how does it relate? MU1 is very low density. It doesn't even meet your neighborhood scale. It meets more like a suburban area, like 4 or 8 units to the acre, like townhouse level development. Whereas a neighborhood scale up to 24 would be a pretty intense townhome, or maybe a low scale, very low multifamily.
Okay, so if we were to condense those down to 3, are we opening up? Low density would be anything from 0 to neighborhood scale, and then, you know what I mean? Like, are we then expanding what low density really means if we just go to those 3?
Essentially, you wouldn't be having a low density mixed use. Your zoning, your future land use map pretty much showed in your residential areas you want to have commercial, but you didn't want commercial or mixed use. You wanted residential. And because you see the way you laid out the city seems to really keep those separate, you wouldn't actually have that mixed use, that low density. You would just have more of that neighborhood density, because that's what your policy is saying. That's what you want for mixed use. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't, a mixed use person couldn't come in with a lower density project, and they all have to come before you for a rezoning. And the only way they get, by the way, this is the other issue. Let me see if I wrote it on here. They can get those densities is if they meet certain bonus criteria. So they might, at the neighborhood, they could only have 8 units to the acre unless they gave a bunch of amenities and showed you of a range of a list of things that are in your code, how they earn every density bump. So that eight units to the acre, you were asking, are we losing our low density? That 8 units to the acre is your lower density. It's just you're doing away with having anything in your suburbs. You're not where you don't want it anyway. You don't want commercial from what your future land use map says and what most of your comp plan indicates.
No, Michelle, I would say that we've as you know, we've spent a lot of time on looking at, in particular, the Stonecrest Overlay District. We've convened committees. We have the Stonecrest Business Alliance. We have people that you all talk to, already talked to, but there is a concern with, the consolidation. And at this point in time, I still think that, I hear what you're saying, but I don't see the harm in not consolidating. Because we can still, as you say, we can still extract what we want, or as a region, or as an overlay district, as opposed to the citywide input as to what we quote unquote want. But this is as far as the region is concerned, there is a ton of build out and a ton of projects that are coming along that has been basically looked at from the eyes of 5 tiers, as opposed to from the eyeglasses of 3 tiers, which may or may not have some effect on the future build out. the build out to which we do subscribe to, which is the mixed use along Mall Parkway and in throughout Tier 1, including the view shed district that we put into the tiers just to insert a certain look and feel. So, I'm still, not quite convinced on the 5 districts into 3 as of yet.
Sure. And this is the districts. This isn't the Stonecrest overlay.
I'm sorry,
We
the tiers.
have removed that. We heard that that wasn't desired. So we removed on the Stonecrest overlay that recommendation. But fair enough. I absolutely hear you. So if there's any other.
And I would echo the same thing.
Okay.
I don't think we've driven this car far enough to give an opinion on it yet. There's some things that we still need to take a look at with the 5 classifications before we start consolidating them down to make it just 3.
Sure, and it's pure density. It's purely about the numbers. So if it's not something that you feel the need for and you're happy with, then we'll just leave it as is. Without.
I don't want to say we're happy with it or we're dissatisfied with it. It's just a matter of understanding it, and we haven't had to deal with it enough to say that it's terrible or it's the best thing ever. So I propose let us stay with it a little while longer to see if there is an issue that needs to be dealt with. Right now, I don't see a problem. So I don't know if we need to fix a problem that we don't have yet, unless someone can show me where there's a serious problem. And what I've heard so far doesn't demonstrate to me that there's a serious problem that needs fixing.
Right. It's just anticipating what would come in, that they are coming in at the densities that match up with your policy. But I hear what you're saying. Okay.
Real quick, Michelle, I just want to can you restate it again, that you are recommending going down to 3 from 5 because it contradicted our current policy or future land use, or both?
Your current policy that shows the policy about what is the right density was not didn't have a one-to-one match with your zoning districts. So consolidating the 5 existing zoning into 3 just creates that one-to-one correspondence of that 8 to 24 units, 24 to 60, and then up to 120, that those are your 3 buckets based on your comp plan. And all it does is it signals to your applicants what you really want. So it's a way to anticipate something in the future. And to your point, there wasn't, it hasn't been tested, and you'll see, I guess, as projects come in. It's and to your other point, to Councilman Clanton's point, you also have the overlays on top of this. So this isn't the end all be all. But one thing that makes your code complicated is you have the underlying with a set of criteria, and then on top of that, you have another set of the overlay tiers. So you could have a 2-tiered project.
Right. Okay.
Way to try to simplify it.
So leaving it with 5 still leaves us with the inconsistency of the comp plan. Okay.
Correct. But it still is, you can still do, it still can work. You just will have to make that, it just takes that extra effort of communications, and also with the community about your intention, that your comp plan is actually supporting this higher level of density.
Exactly.
Right. May I ask a question, please?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yes, Michelle. Even with the recommended changes from 5 to 3, does it nullify if someone wanted to only have 6 units per acre? Where would they fall? Would that be an issue?
It is not an issue.
MU1?
It is not an issue. It is up to these densities. You can absolutely have lower density than what is on the max. These are the max. So
I only really thought about the 1, because when you said that with the 5, it was 4 to 8 per acre. And I'm looking at the one now with the recommended changes starting at 8. I'm just wondering, not to include 8, but everything else below, where would they fall and how would they be classified? But if you said that it's okay and they could come into the MU1, even if they were lower than 8, then my question has been answered.
Yes, they can go in lower than that. What you see,
Okay.
that 8 that's their base. They're allowed by right in that area, in the MU1, you would be allowed by right to have 8 units to the acre. If you had a great proposal and you convinced the city by meeting a whole list of criteria, you could get bonuses until you reach up to 24. Minimum would be you could get that 8, but you could also go less than that. You could come in with 4, you could come in with 6.
Michelle, explain it real quickly, I guess. What do you mean by bonuses? I want a better understanding of that.
Yeah, so your zoning ordinance has, for any of your mixed residential, your multifamily, and for your mixed use, all of those districts have a base density. But then the only way you can get higher densities is if you achieve a list. And I don't know, maybe Nikki has the code open. One of the tables, Nikki, that shows the bonuses for like mixed use districts and MU2.
Yeah, I have it open here.
There's that list. There's a list of things, of criteria that an applicant has to earn their way to get density. Now, again, the overlays are on top of that, and overlays have additional privileges potentially. But if just these base zoning code, you can only get density if you show up with whether it's maybe mixed income, some of it's environmental, additional park space. If you have additional open space, you provide some transit option, maybe build a bus shelter. So there's ways to earn, if you will, in quotes, earn higher density. It's still capped according to the zoning district, like you see here. It still would be capped, for example, at 24. But you can't get more than 8 unless you show up and meet a list of things in your code. So your code has a pretty sophisticated way to incentivize higher quality and limit density, actually, in some ways. So both sides of those controls.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing, right?
Yes, I think it's, if I do say so, I think it's a pretty sophisticated mechanism. It hasn't been very well tested, I would say. There hasn't been a lot of applicants, recently coming in to say, I want to do a mixed use, and then they're showing off how they want to do it. So, I don't know, Nikki, do you happen to have that available to share?
I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys not see it?
Sorry, I was still in. Yeah, so those are examples of the list. So if you want to get a higher density than that 8, you saw that 8? Well, that's all you can get. You're stuck with 8 unless you provide potentially any of these things. And then it's by percentage, but it increases up to 24 units to the acre. So one of the big ones is if you become, do some of the and energy efficiency, if you have some mixed income, or affordable housing as part of it, if you have additional enhanced open space, you could double your density. Instead of 8, you get 100% more density if you have, 15% more open space. So it'll be great when these projects start coming in and you use those and tell them what you want to see. Or they start proposing. So those densities are not automatic that I'm showing you. They currently aren't automatic, and what we're proposing aren't automatic. You have to go through this exercise of proving yourself if you're an applicant. So, and if they don't make sense, and you don't think they're worth the value, that's something to amend as well. If you think that the percentage awarded is not commensurate with what the amenity is, you know, that's something to take a look at. All right. So I guess out here in general, at the moment, it doesn't look like there's a need to change these. Let's go ahead and give them time and see how they also coordinate with overlays, because they might offset any of this need in any case. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen and move on. What time is it? So we're 7:38. Is this showing? All right. So remember I mentioned there's like 340 pages in your zoning code, and every section of it, every piece of it that's extraneous is another layer for an applicant and your staff and your code enforcement to have to go through. So that's why we recommend streamlining, trying to take out of the code things that don't apply or don't fit your city. There's 3 districts, for example, you don't use them at all, which indicates you don't have a demand for them. Now, that doesn't mean you won't in the future, but at the moment, these office institutional transitional. Transitional means that this is probably like a house, a residence that is now being used or wants to be used as an office. It was a residential, but now they want to use it as a hair salon. So they are, or a real estate agency office. This typically applies to neighborhoods that are just that, in transition. They don't have the value or demand for the residential. They're seeking to have other uses. They come to you and ask to rezone to this office institutional transitional. So you don't have any currently here, and I would, observing at what your needs are and what your desires are, it doesn't seem that you'd want that in the future. So we're putting it on this list to say these might be ones you would want to take out of your code. Most of your residential zoning districts are R100s, R60s, and you have some REs, residential estate. You have none that are using this residential large lot. So it's just another one that's in your code that it's not being used. And then similarly, there's a mobile home park district that is not being used. You do have mobile home parks, but they're in a industrially zoned. They're zoned industrial. So you're not impacting any existing properties by taking these out of your code. If you agree with our assessment that they're extraneous and not necessary.
Can you elaborate on the OIT, the transitional districts? So when you say transitional in this case, you're not saying that we don't allow this use. You're just saying that we don't need to set aside a district for it?
Correct.
Okay. So the use could be an allowable use in some cases. For instance, if you got a home that you want to transition into an office space, that still would be allowable through our ordinances or code, correct?
Yes, so you have other office districts, and that would actually bring it up to a standard of the non-residential you desire, as opposed to having homes that wind up sort of being hodgepodge, not following, more of a commercial or office standard.
Well, now, so
instead of having a house that I just want to put a sign out front and be a real estate agent, I'd have to make the choice of either reinvesting and keeping the residential value up, or going all in and asking for an office zoning district.
Right. So my thing is this: there are some current, or maybe not so current. Well, there are some homes or houses that could be called homes that are in areas now that are being used as office buildings, for instance, like even in the industrial park. So some of the homes that we look at back there, they're actually not, people don't live there for homes. They're used as office space. And there are some areas when we really look at the city of Stonecrest as we mature, and bring businesses in, that may be converted to where you have a house that will be converted into a office space. I don't think we should just categorically deny that use simply because it's a house. For instance, if there is a location, just as an example, along Ferriton, maybe, where you may have a house somewhere, or maybe not Ferriton, maybe Hillendale, and you may have a house there that can be converted into a dentist office or a law office, or even some other use. I think we should be, I think that should be allowed as not as, I guess, as a special use or slup. There should be some way to facilitate that transition, because that's why they call it transitional. I would imagine is because it's in an area by location that can easily be transitioned from a house to a office, as opposed to being in a subdivision.
Right, right.
And let me just add to that, and that is that if you go along Panola Road between I-20 and Covington Highway, you'll find that there are several houses there that have been converted, and I suspect that others that may well consider it. So what you're saying is that we need to just move away from that, such that if anyone else wants to convert a residential facility to a really commercial use, then we should deny that and go with a traditional commercial usage instead of the transition?
Well, if you currently have some that are operating that way, they are doing so because they meet some standard. They meet some zoning criteria. They're not this district, the OIT district. So the OIT district would be the appropriate, from what it sounds like you're describing. If you desire that development and you want to make sure that's an option for that development, then let's leave it. Absolutely. Let's not touch it.
Yeah, I would say let's leave that one. Because, I mean, if you go to Decatur, the city of Decatur, you would see that type use. If you go to Conyers, downtown Conyers, you can probably not find many, traditional type businesses. You find a ton of houses that were homes at some point turned into law offices and the like. So yeah, I think we should just out of abundance of caution at this point in time, just leave the OIT on the books. That's my personal opinion.
I can say the some of those houses that are being used as offices, some of them are, majority of them are located in the overlay district. So that's why they don't have the classification of office institutional transition. That's the piece that Michelle is referring to. That's the part where they meet the code, some zoning standard, is why they can operate as an office inside a house and so forth.
Might I ask one question before you move along? I'm sorry. Michelle or Chris?
Yes.
Are there any of the office institutional transitional in District 5? And if so, I just want you to point those out for me. Doesn't have to be now, but at some point I want you to point those out, because that's a big concern for me. The other ones I'm good with, but that one I want to make sure that I have a handle on that, okay? So you can sticky note that for me. Thank you.
Right there on Covington Highway before you get to Chubb Road.
Uh-huh. Yep, used to be a law office. Is that what you're talking about, the greenhouse?
Yep.
Okay.
I thought you just said that we don't have any.
So they're not zoned OIT. What you're describing are, they're used that way. Houses that are being used as offices, either because they're in an overlay, as Chris was saying, or maybe they're just non-conforming. I don't currently have any that are zoned OIT.
I just got a text from
Development OIT allows.
Sorry. I just got a text from Al, and he was saying many of those uses weren't approved by DeKalb County. So essentially, we probably just grandfathered them in. So a lot of that were not approved. So again, we do not have any current property that is zoned office institutional transitional at this time.
Oh yeah, and I don't disagree with that. That's not my point. My point is that we should not remove it from our books as such, so that at some point in time we may want to cursory and actually start setting up or looking at OITs within the city of Stonecrest as we transition from what we are to what we want to be. So we just got to leave. My own personal opinion is that I think it's not going to be hurtful to leave that in place.
And let me ask one more question before you move on to the next topic. I am okay with taking it out or leaving it, as long, but under one condition of understanding. And I think Councilman Clayton had asked this question, and I don't know if I missed the answer or it just went over my head. But if you were to remove that district, that doesn't still disqualify the use. So someone could still ask for that use without having that district designated, or am I misunderstanding that?
So Tiff, you can, there's certain uses that are allowed in certain high density, which I have to grab my use table in a minute to say, but yeah, it won't stop the person from actually doing office at their home. Short of answer, yes. So, because most of our business licenses that come into the city are home occupational businesses anyway. So they're using 25% of their home for their business. Those who primarily use a business for their a house for their business, they would probably be looking for a zoning classification like that. However, most people don't do that. They don't just take their home and then turn it into a office space. They usually go find a place to go rent one, or they just decide just to keep operating in their house because, again, you're only using 25% of their home anyway. So this office use institutional transitional, that would be something of a more specific big company that would come in to ask for this type of zoning classification. Your regular individual person wouldn't ask for this.
Okay, I was just trying to get an understanding of what I think Councilman Clayton asked a good question. What was the harm of keeping it in? I was trying to get a clear understanding of what is the harm in taking it out. But it sounds like, you know, in the middle of the way with what we're currently doing, what was already there when we adopted the city, and what we might do in the future. So we may err on the side of caution and just keep it.
Yeah, because I can think of a couple of throughways where we may want to one day go to the OIT district designation. Is like up and down Panola Road, for instance, up and down Klondike, for instance, all the way into District 5, Councilwoman Grimes. And there's a couple of other throughways that could be set aside for OITs as we transition from people being able to live in their homes, given the uncertain times. Some people may actually find it, beneficial not to continue to live in those homes that they can't afford due to pandemics or other issues. And then those buildings become either vacant or more available to businesses. So, we may want to just have that. I mean, again, I don't see the harm in leaving it. And I think there would be more harm, in removing it and then having to come back and try to put it back in, for a specific business, so, that way we can keep this, all the specific issues out of the picture.
Chris, question, what percentage, you might have answered this, what percentage of a person's home is considered business or has to be considered business, whether it be under this type of district?
So again, what for this district, this would be theoretically for this to work, you would need to be in an area that a large swath. It wouldn't be just an individual parcel, say a single family home. You would have to look at maybe a neighborhood or an area or something big for this use to work. It's just not just one individual home. You're looking at a large, say if you're going up down Covenant Highway, Panola Road, and you see a bunch of homes and so forth that are no longer where anybody lives, this use will probably work. That probably would work. But if you're just looking for an individual house, 25% of your home can be used towards a home office. So if I hear you correctly, so a perfect area would be Covenant Highway, actually be in District 1, is Councilman Clayton's district, because that area used to be in the Stonecrest overlay. It's no longer in the overlay now. So office transitional would probably fit within that area. I guess the issue would be is the minimum lot size requirement for that. To fit that nature, because again, a lot of those are individual homes and so forth. So you would need to try to cobble that together and then try to rezone all that. But again, that's just getting a little bit too much into the weeds and so forth. So I can have another conversation about that.
No, you answered the question very well. Thank you.
Michelle, RLG, can you give a definition clearer on what the residential lot looks like?
Yeah, the residential large lot, I'm gonna have to, let's see, Nikki, do you have that, what the square footage is? It's,
Sure, yeah. Just give me 1 second here. You want minimum lot size?
Yes.
Okay, the minimum lot size for RLG is 20,000 square feet.
Do the math right quick. How many acres is that?
It's about a
That's-
little less
that's-
than half an acre.
yeah.
Was it half an acre?
Yeah, less than half an acre. Oh, I want to apologize too. I apologize. I was looking at the wrong lot size for OIT. So it can fit the model that you were talking about, Councilman McLean, or the entire council that you're saying. So I apologize. I misread my chart.
And Michelle, you made a comment that we didn't have any RLGs in the city?
correct. There, that you don't have any, you see on the map on the screen, which is showing which of the zoning is displayed, and we didn't see any properties that were zoned RLG. As I recall, that was a district created or consolidated. That would be something less than what you have now is the RE, the residential estate, the large, very large, or an ag toward estate and ag use. And it was a district, like I said, created, but it was never applied, as I understood it, into CAB. So anyway, I don't see it that we had any here in the city.
It was never applied, but there are some that meet the definition.
Well, if they meet the definition for RLG, then anything smaller than an RE would meet the definition, I think, of an RLG. So I think it's because you already have other districts that accommodate it, it's extraneous.
But is that not what we're taking a look at to fix what needs to be fixed? If something is improperly labeled, we will get the proper label on it.
Well, for these large lots, that these from what we saw, these lots were meeting the criterion. I know you pointed out an issue with the zoning map related to the RSM, but we didn't see any of that kind of discrepancy for these districts.
I'm not clear.
Everything is zoned, the residential is either zoned RE, so it either meets that really, really large lot that has to be at least an acre, or it's R100, which is 15,000 square feet minimum. So it's just a little less than that in between. So, which is most of what your lots are, that R100 or the R85 that you can see is all this orange down here. And then all the R100 is all through the Arabian Mountain overlay there. And most of District 4 is R100 as well. So that district satisfies everything you have. There's not really a need to have a second large lot residential district.
Okay, so if anything is mislabeled, we can fix that labeling before we finish this process.
We're saying we don't see any mislabeling for the RLG related to the RE,
Not for the
R100.
RLG, but some that probably should fit in different categories. And it's not in one of these three, so I'll bring it up when we get to it. Okay.
We had looked at the overlay districts. We spoke several times with leadership of the Arabian Mountain Alliance. We are saying that we recommend no changes to that overlay. We are looking at, with leadership in the Alliance, some either special criteria to allow certain either seasonal uses or some other uses on these large properties that could also protect the environment and keep the spirit of the protection. So we're looking at some creative potential additions, but at the moment, no recommendations for change. The Stonecrest overlay, we had discussed ways to simplify the tiers. We've removed that recommendation to Councilman Clanton's point earlier. But we do still, more from a operational aspect of the code, we recommend incorporating the design standards. They are currently a separate document. When discussing this with business community, some of the business community indicated that would be helpful. It doesn't, it actually helps institutionalize it, that these additional standards exist. And they put it in it gets codified instead of as a separate document. One or two people indicated they didn't see the need for it, keep it separate. We recommend, we want to remove duplication. In the overlay, when this chapter 3 or article 3 that introduces the overlays, there's a whole section about procedures. And then when you go into the Stonecrest overlay, it essentially repeats that whole section of procedures. So we'd like to clean that up. We're not removing any of the substance. All the requirements will remain intact. It just will give users a fighting chance of which to use and avoid the duplication that currently exists in the code. There was some discussion about some tweaks potentially to modernize the design guidelines, but that would only be done with your stakeholders who have worked on the Stonecrest overlay in the past. What we wanted to discuss with you, we brought it up in the meeting last time, is there's tier 5 of the Stonecrest overlay. Recall there are several tiers. Tier 5, we put a circle around it here. So just to orient everyone, you see where this is I-20 up along here, this red circle, picture that's where the mall is. And then these tiers transition downwards to this yellow area, these yellow sets of parcels is tier 5. They are all zoned R100. They're all residential. Your future land use map, we put down here, you see yellow and green. So the future land use map says, yeah, we want it either protected or residential. We want it green space type of uses or conservation or residential. We wanted just to highlight or bring to your attention that tier 5 currently allows some non-residential. It's limited in scale. We just wanted, again, to speak to earlier, no one wants surprises. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware. And if you want to keep it residential and not allow facilities like, having a daycare center, having offices, having retail, and they are right next to your, conservation overlay area. So you might want to look at, do you want to allow office and medical and retail and, larger facilities? By child daycare facility, that doesn't mean, keeping kids in your home. That's a facility, it's a business with drop off and pick up every day. So in addition to that R100, which is the base zoning, the overlay currently also allows these additional non-residential uses. So we were surprised and just wanted to make sure either you want to keep that or you wanted to modify that so that that's not done by right. There's not existing subdivisions. These are all large lots, a lot of them undeveloped. So maybe there's no harm, no foul, but we're bringing it to your attention because it jumped out as we did our analysis.
Yeah, I think that last statement is pretty much where I'm at. No harm, no foul. But now, just to be certain, are you saying the underlying zoning is R100, correct?
It is.
So right. So if by chance those areas were removed from the overlay, then it would just revert to R100.
It stays R100, stays residential.
Okay, so we have options there, and I think again that is another event that we certainly do need to pay close attention to, and just really to zoom in on it as you have pointed out, and just figure out what it is that we want for the future as far as the development in there, and what would we X out by just
Yeah.
converting tier 5 into all residential as opposed to the current allowable uses. Now this list to the right are those these are the current uses that are allowed, correct?
By right,
And
yeah. So
just because
any of
they're in the overlay, right? Okay.
So any of these neighbors or any of these, folks, along here, that any of these properties could put in an office, could put in some sort of retail.
So, and if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, that the street that we're talking about, is that Hayden Quarry for the most part?
This is right, that's up here. If you can see right where
Yeah,
that,
that's Hayden Quarry right there.
that's
Okay.
Hayden Quarry. So it's south of there, these parcels that are,
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The biggest concern I would have is not versus the overlay, the Stonecrest overlay, the uses, but versus the Arabian Mountain overlay, which is nearby. And I don't see that interference, with these business development if we went that route. But at some point in time, we certainly need to crystallize and just really zoom in on all 12 of these and see what we want to keep and what we want to get rid of. Because I'm certain that we don't want to go, from my opinion, from what we had talked about in the overlay district meeting on that committee, is that we didn't, at that particular time, we wasn't looking to just go all R100, and I could be wrong, but I certainly would like to circle back with that group, which we sort of kind of promised that we would do. And I know that you talked to some of the members of that group. And so, but I do think it's something worth looking at.
Michelle. I see where Hayden Quarry is, but in this yellow, help me get to New Birth, if you can see it like that, because I'm sure it's a big piece. Are you able to tell me, either Michelle or Chris,
Maybe
where New
Chris.
Birth and?
New Birth is not in the overlay at all.
Yeah, New Birth is not in that circle. New Birth is that big piece of yellow right close to Interstate 20. It's right there. Yeah, that's where New Birth is.
Oh, so New Birth is on this piece. And where's our new street from New Birth? Is that it right there in the middle right there?
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
it?
Okay. That is it.
All right, that helps me. So then none of this yellow is in District 5? Is all of this yellow in the yellow in the big dot? Yeah, all of that yellow, is that in District 1?
Hold on a second.
Because I know Hayden Quarry, I know where that is, but none of that seems to be, okay. I was a little confused. Thank you.
And you're about to take me into another pet peeve I had, and that is you keep calling that yellow. That looks like it's gold to me. And that has created, it has created some confusion.
Oh yeah.
About the color code. You got an old gold, you got a yellow gold, and you got a.
No, you have the peach, you have the yellow, you have the chartreuse, and then you have what is over here. This is pale, this is flesh or nude, where New Birth and
Nude.
Yeah, that's nude.
What is chartreuse?
Yo green. No, this is
that funky green.
Avocado green. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Tier 5 is located all in District 1.
Okay. Then that cuts out my question.
Yeah. So and I had reached out and asked the Alliance for another meeting for folks who had been working on the overlay, just to come back full circle with it on this point, and checking in also with the Arabian Alliance, their understanding, and the impacts potentially adjacent to their borders. Any other comments or direction?
Yeah, I have some question here. So if I want to make sure I have some understanding, I guess, before I ask the question. If the base zoning is residential, is R100, and even in the future land use map, we apparently would like to keep it that way. let me see the best way to ask this. I guess, why are we contemplating or why, yeah, I guess we're contemplating this still. Why are we contemplating allowing a different uses on parcels that we clearly would like to keep residential? I guess I don't understand what the contemplation is, because if and I say that because if we want to leave the ability to put things there that are obviously completely opposite of residential, why are we doing that through the overlay? Why didn't the future land use map read like that versus continuing to keep it R100? You know, it's kind of weird to me that we would say, even in our future land use, that we want this to be residential, but then kind of, no pun intended, overlay that with, well, you know, there may be some folks who want to do something different, so let's provide them an avenue to do that, where there's no scrutiny.
Well,
So
yeah, actually, Councilwoman Carver, that's the point of the overlay, is to provide for different uses than initial uses. So there's been opportunities where the city council actually have withdrew portion of for instance, Tier 4 was basically removed from along Turner Hill Road, which then moved those properties back down to their underlying use, which is R100. So, you know, the whole thing is with the overlay is to provide for a certain type of growth in a certain type of way in a particular area. And that's why, you know, you have all these overlaid uses that would normally, it had to start from somewhere. They was initially like maybe R100, or they could have been commercial, but now the overlay say, let's consider these uses. Let's consider the child daycare or what the bed and breakfast or in, like Michelle said, these are not like home-based businesses. These are actual businesses, you know, buildings and stuff like that. So, you know, my thing is, I agree with you that 1 through 12 may not be needed, but somewhere maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or one of these may be a good idea for the area. And my point was to Michelle was that, look, since we are looking at this, we already started looking at this over 2 years ago as a committee, that these things was discussed, and we never finished that conversation. And I just think that we should definitely continue that conversation and have the community and stakeholders and other council members, you know, Councilman Rob Turner was on that committee, to chime in on what goes on in the overlay district.
Well, yeah, and I think this is the opportunity for us to do that. I mean, if we're gonna update the zoning ordinance, I don't know a better time to continue to have that conversation.
And I agree, except for the part about I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't mean no harm, but you know, I just think there should be more background, more. I think council should be provided with more information than what is just these 12 listed items, without the reasoning behind the overlay district, which was not brought about by the city of Stonecrest, by the way. It was something that we inherited, and then we just tried to make it better. So we're continuing along in that process. So, you know, yeah, you're right. This is a good place to start the conversation. But I hope it's not the place where we end the conversation.
I mean, maybe it's worth, you know, having a meeting to discuss and get more detail on just this before we, you know, move forward with the zoning ordinance, because I would like to get some more detail and some more understanding of, you know, why, I guess, is my question. Because I mean, I understand that the overlay, my understanding of the overlay is to provide additional conditions that would obviously, you know, make things better, right, for this particular area, not just to completely redefine the use. Because I mean, I guess to me, just a little bit, I need a little bit more conversation, I guess, and maybe that's what I'm, because if it's a base zoning and then we put something on top of it that's completely different than the base zoning, I guess I don't understand the point of the base zoning if we're just going to lay something over it that deviates completely from what that is. I mean, I just,
Yeah.
I gotta understand the relationship and the relevancy of continuing that kind of relationship. And it just, so yeah, maybe this right here is worth a separate meeting, but I
Yeah.
don't think we should
Yes.
move on with the
May,
zoning.
may I just add something? And it
Yeah.
was my understanding is that when Stonecrest Mall was developed, there was an anticipation that growth would just go wild in all directions. And you wouldn't want a car dealership down here, a 20-story hotel. So that is the protection against this being rezoned for something that would just be totally out of whack with blending into the neighborhood. So it is a lesser of what you would get in one of the other tiers closer to the mall. So that was the protection you're getting. Not that it would not allow anything to happen here other than residential, because what you would get traditionally as a facility this size, or development this size, would grow like it should have grown, then it should be on the fringes of the neighborhood by now. So as it comes closer to the fringes of the neighborhood, you just want to make sure that what comes, other than residential, is something that you can live with in terms of a transition from super duper at the mall
Right,
to being something kind of
right.
5 steps down as you get closer to the residential neighborhood.
Well, let
Exactly.
me say this, Councilman,
You're
to
tearing down.
Councilman Clanton's point, though, you know, it is left, we didn't have any closure to this, and we really do. I think it's good now that all the council has some kind of understanding and perspective on it and get a full understanding so we can bring it to closure and then do what we need to do in reference to the zoning for this area, because we don't want it to be something that we didn't intend for it to be in the beginning. So we do need another conversation with us. I totally agree.
Yeah. 'Cause
I
so
could bring back to you the, what was, you all discussed last year when you put together the future land use map, and your visioning and your, I know you had a lot of community meetings and discussion about what does the city want to happen here? And, the thought behind having it primarily residential, and provide some of that background from that side of your discussions last year.
Yeah, and exactly. So we had the input from the communities and from stakeholders as such in regards to the future land use map, but I think it's a well publicized or stated fact that, my whole thing with a lot of these master plans is that we don't have the input that these plans deserve. So what you have is maybe a few people saying that this use is great for this particular area, but they don't have the background or the insight to really make that call. And, and that's why, sometimes when you start doing city planning, and I know a lot of people in the public may not like to hear this, but you have to lean on professional guidance at some point in time, because everything is just not out in the wild that we can all just, we can all have an opinion about it, but what will work best for the area in the future as we grow out. So we don't want to limit our growth by removing certain types of zoning or types of build out or types of uses. What we do want to provide for is an arena to growth. And if that arena doesn't take place, then that underlying zoning is always there that we can revert back to just simply by removing a particular area from the overlay. And that's the whole point of having that underlying zoning remain in place. So if the bed and breakfasts don't work, if the community facilities don't materialize, or if the growth in that area just don't materialize like we thought it was going to, then we can always go back to that underlying zoning. But if we remove the tier, it would be next to impossible to come back and add an overlay to it after the fact now. So it'll make it hard. So my point is not to remove the tier. My point is, let's talk about it. Let's dive into it as a group and see where we can go with you guys' guidance, because you are the professional help here.
Yeah, and with I would say economic development, the economic principles about sprawling out non-residential. If you want to concentrate, if you want your non-residential to concentrate along, north of Hayden Quarry, then one way to do that is have some boundaries of where you don't allow it to, I'm going to use the term sprawl south towards your residential. So that would be, I would want to hear, to your point, what from the economic development implications are of allowing it too. Okay, well, thank you. That was helpful. I knew we needed to have that conversation. And like I said, we also had reached out to have further conversation with some of the folks from the Business Alliance to get more of that feedback too. I-20, your overlay, there was some housekeeping and cleanup on there. We wanted to add some uses as it related to film industry. We know from economic development that you get inquiries for that kind of use in this area. We also recommended that the design guidelines that are currently a separate document, that you incorporate it into your code. Unless you had substantive or things of substance you wanted to make sure we addressed, we didn't have other recommendations for I-20 overlay. Now it gets into.
I'm surprised we didn't have more input about the I-20 overlay. Now, I-20 overlay, correct me if I'm wrong, but that include most of the Panola Industrial Park area, or at least parts of it, if not all of it. Is that correct?
It does, yes.
Okay, so if that's the case, then I think one thing we certainly should look to ensure in that area, in my opinion, and I talked to Councilman Turner as well, and I mean, I'm certain he would chime in at some point on this as well, is that area should not look like Lithonia Industrial Park. That area should be that area should be more geared towards light industrial, and we may have to look at how to approach our zoning and our use tables to not allow certain types of facilities in that area, because I don't think that area was ever intended for certain type of industries that we're looking at moving into that area at this point in time, which would be, in my opinion, better serve the city in the Lithonia industrial area in certain locations within that industrial park. So, I think there should be some kind of way we can protect that area, should protect the area going forward. Even though there's light industrial, maybe, that can be changed to some kind of commercial or office build out, something on that level as opposed to concrete plants, whether it's recycling or any other type of concrete plant.
To your point, Councilman Clanton, that you have made a very good one. We have talked to several of the studios in that area, and also talked to DeKalb County Film Commission. We're looking at developing an entertainment zone in that area where businesses can build around that, those studios, that will make it more substantial, will make it make it a stronger entity. So still in the kind of the process of that, but to zone in reference to businesses that can enhance the film industry, whether they be, I don't know, rental, equipment rental, different things like that. But those kind of businesses that will really flourish and really develop that industry in that area. So that's what we're looking at right now. So we're still in the process of that coming forth, and I'll continue to give you our information as we continue to proceed with that. Because as I said, we're working with the studios. We have about 4 studios, and also we're working with the DeKalb County Film Commission to help develop that. That will be the first entertainment zone really in DeKalb County, and I believe in the state of Georgia. So it's a very important project that we're working on that we really do need to facilitate and put an overlay or really strengthen that area for.
It's very exciting. Awesome.
And in facilitating that, and I agree with Councilman Turner, is that we have to protect that area from other type of, not wanted or unwanted uses. So, when I travel over in that area, it's a very beautiful, attractive industrial park. And I think, it's just there, you got the Academy of Scholars, you got all these type of, and then now the movie theater, the movie and the filming industry move over in that direction. You have really nice warehousing, you have some churches in there. I mean, I think we should make certain we find a way to protect that area from any other type use. And I don't know how we can go about that, but it should be restricted to a certain type of, light industrial that doesn't include concrete,
I agree with that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Well, that was going to be my question. And to your point, Councilman Clayton, the only reason I didn't say anything in this area is because it was specific to the overlay. And I felt like those uses will be changed in the use table, not necessarily through the overlay.
Hey, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Cobble, could you repeat that? My computer froze for a moment. What were you saying?
I was saying that to his point, the only reason why I didn't bring that up in this portion of the conversation is because I thought that we would change the use, any use changes to the use table would come through the use table, not through the overlay. So that was kind of the only reason why, at least I didn't have a comment in this area, is because I too am very interested in making sure that, where we appropriately place M2 where it needs to be, M1 where it needs to be. So heavy is where it should be appropriately and light is where it should appropriately be. But I didn't think that was done through the overlay. I thought that was mainly done through the use table.
And that's
But
the beauty of these overlays, is that you can restrict certain uses just simply by adding it within the overlay. You can change the overlay uses, which would change that or restrict the allowable uses within an overlay district. So that's the whole beauty of it, And still protect the underlying zoning. So if it was zoned underlying, preserve, not protect. But if it was zoned, if there was an underlying zoning for M1, in this case for M1, and you change the overlay to say that particular type of use or that particular type of M1 is not allowed, you can do that. And then at some point in the future, if that turns into a true light industrial park, you can always remove the overlay and go back to the M1, the underlying zoning. Same as what happened with the M100.
Does that still preserve the parcels that are zone M2?
In this area, there aren't.
There's no.
It's all M. There's not M2 here. It's all light industrial zoning. The base is light.
Okay, that makes more.
What I hear is we'll look at these parallel. There may be some uses that you want to maintain in your underlying industrial, but in this in the I-20 overlay, we want to maybe add some certain of the heavier light industrial. You might want to add some prohibited uses. So we'll take a look at that with, like I said, with economic development, and with you all, as you said, you're looking with state and film industry interests. We can come back with either some recommendations or wait until your negotiations or discussions are complete to make those changes.
And maybe some of what I'm thinking of is more about maybe redefining what is light and what is heavy. And I guess that would be through the use table.
Yep.
Yeah, but Michelle, do we even have to go that far? Because if we just make it a restricted use for the overlay, we can leave the underlying zoning in place, and you still wouldn't have to just remove M1 per se. Because what's happening in a particular instance, you had a factory that come in as an M1, which was an allowable use, but if the overlay restricted that use, then it couldn't have came there. So we could just use the overlay table of use or restriction or allowable uses and remove and put that in the non-allowable use category, and you can leave the underlying zoning. And again, at some point in time, we might find in our wisdom that we might do want to come back and just make that M1. It may be okay at some point in time, but right now, it's something that we need to pay attention to.
We're looking at two use tables. It's the general use table and the overlay use table. So we can fix it in the overlay use table.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. So explain to me then, what is the advantage of fixing it in the overlay use table and not in the base use table? What's the advantage?
Preserving the underlying zoning is one advantage, and I think it would probably be easier if you did it through the overlay.
Right, but if the use is a use that we don't want to preserve under that zoning, why would we do that?
preserving is not the same thing as allowing. So it'll be preserved. Just like right now, we don't necessarily have to allow that type of uses. We can allow other M1s that you may want in that area. There are other M1s that may be okay. So if we remove all M1s, that might not be helpful. So, but if we say a particular type of usage that is now currently under M1, we want to get rid of that particular type usage. Why, it's kind of like throwing out the baby with the bathwater type situation. So that's why the overlay is kind of a better way to attack it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater either. And I guess we'll get to this conversation. Well, it looks like Michelle's already flipped us there. But redefining the use, or recategorizing, I guess, the use, to me, it's just cleaner, and it's crystal clear as to where, that certain use can be, because we've already recategorized it to where it has no choice but to be in a certain area. You're not relying on anything else. It's crystal clear that this use is now attached to this zoning.
Right. So yeah. So but just to be clear, we're now use and zoning is kind of like two different things. So for instance, if we didn't want a crematorium in a particular overlay district, we can just make that a non-allowable use, but we can keep cemeteries. But so in this case, if you're looking at the chart that Michelle has put on the board, which they're talking about as recommendation, adding permitted uses in M, you have like business and technology parks. So you don't want to throw that out. You don't want to throw out research laboratories. You don't want to throw out, you definitely don't want to probably throw out art galleries and computer and software stores, because all those would fit real nice in that area. But that there is some other M's that should require a slump or not be allowed at all in that area by use through the overlay, which to me is the easier path. And to me would be cleaner.
Okay. The difference would be, is it a geographic, targeted prohibition of certain uses?
I guess for me it was.
Or is there a citywide change? You want it to?
No, it's geographic.
What are you saying? Use the overlay to determine geographically, just pinpoint how we want to modify it. And I'm not sure if Councilwoman Cobble is saying, why don't we consider if we want them citywide, some adjustments?
Well, yeah, I guess I was saying both. And I mean, there are some situations where we do want to do it geographically, but I think to protect the city overall, there are some places in the use table that we need to make some adjustments to, just to ensure that we have covered all our bases. I mean, I just kind of feel like, going through the overlay, it's almost like a spot change. And, when things, you just don't capture the citywide, I guess, initiative or the citywide target if you just do it through the overlay.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're right. It is a spot change, and the thing is that when you look at, for instance, M's or M1s or whatever you want to call them, there should be a place in the city of Stonecrest for those. These are not typically bad industries, and they're nowhere near some of the uses that you can find in M2. So I don't think we should on a citywide level start restricting what's now categorized as M or M1s. I mean, but since we have these two overlays in place, we can certainly protect those areas easily. We're not even asking to create a new overlay. You got, the I-20 overlay and you got Stonecrest overlay. Those two overlays are easily protected. And then Councilman George Turner is asking for to look at another overlay district that will further protect those areas. So that's the whole point of having these overlays, is to help protect spotted issues, the community from certain types of build outs that are not, convenient for the community, and certain other types of build out that would make the community better. So that's why you do the overlays.
So may I ask a question? So am I to understand with full clarity that the original use table is superseded by what the overlays say?
Yes. If you are
That's
in an overlay,
That's what I'm
the
trying to
overlay,
understand.
you're in an overlay, the overlay trumps your underlying zoning district. Sometimes the overlay allows you to keep your base district and adds privileges or adds standards maybe, or design requirements. But sometimes it adds prohibitions that wipe out some of your use table uses that are allowed in the base district. Depends on your, your objectives. Mhm.
Okay, so one more question, and this may or may not be something that this, and it might. Is there a side-by-side comparison for every use and its overlay?
You could pull out the, no, short answer, no. But you can pull out from the overlay the uses. Thing is, your overlays are complicated. Your overlays have several tiers. So it's not like you have one overlay. It's like you have 5 per every overlay. So for every tier, there's a section, of what might be prohibited or added, prohibited or allowed. Like I was showing you in this one, in the tier 5 in Stonecrest, you get your underlying that residential R100. That's your underlying, and then it gives you these additional 12. But there's not a side by side that says, it's just in each of the tiers right now to show what you get in addition to your underlying district. This list of uses.
Okay, so is there some type of written text or written document or something to support what's being said? Because see, I'm going to put this like this, like.
Well, we can have a separate, I'm happy to do a separate meeting and we can walk through the code. I mean, all I could do is open the code and show you the page where this is laid out, if that's helpful.
That might be helpful. Okay, we can talk offline if nobody else needs that, but I want to be
okay.
Yeah, and that's another good reason to add the design guidelines to the code as well, so that as people step through the code, they're able to do that. So right now we're on Muni code, but part of like some of the the design guidelines you will not find there.
Yeah.
But they are pertinent and they do exist and they have to be there and they are applicable.
Right. And as a designer, if I'm the engineer or architect and I don't know about those, I'm just going off of Muni code, then I've just designed something for my owner that, I have to start over once I find those design guidelines. What I have up on the screen, I jumped to this part because of the conversation about your light industrial versus heavy industrial. And after a lot of meetings and discussions and, working residential, that's hilarious. Sorry for that typo. Kind of looking at how do you, as you see on the bottom, I have a recommendation, and how do you protect, you have existing businesses that are thriving and have been around a long time in your industrial areas that, they might be adjacent to residential, but because they have 350 feet buffers and rivers and all kinds of divide, they just haven't had any issue, even though technically they're adjacent to residential. They are operating maybe as M1 industrial, some pretty heavy uses. So we were asked by some of you, some of the elected officials asked us to look at either moving things, some of these intense operations that fall under the rubric of recycling, but some of your industrial business owners have really schooled me and scolded, if not scolded, but help me understand, recycling really isn't a helpful term when it comes to your operations. It's really whether you're doing recovered materials, collection or processing, and then whether those processing operations generate some kind of solid waste or not. And we were also looking at, thresholds about, well, how do we get additional review and understand the impact of these very intense industrial businesses. And one criteria might be, well, if it has a EPD, if it has to get some kind of environmental permit, then let's put the brakes on, or at least pump, slow the roll on some of these uses. But that's not a simple, one size doesn't fit all with it. An environmental permit, because there's noise permits, there's water, there's, emissions, there's different kind of pollutant. So there's a variety of different kinds of environmental impacts that may or may not actually have impacts on our neighborhoods, for example. So what are we trying to regulate? And what I heard most from you all and also from the community meetings was some of the more intense, the concern about being adjacent to residential. And again, you don't want to penalize those who are successful. So you have some of these existing businesses that are conducting recovered materials facilities, and they don't have conflict with some of their residential neighbors, but they also have pretty massive buffers and other environmental distances from their neighbors. So we look back, initially when we came to you, we had recommended that you consider moving from light industrial into heavy industrial, move everything over to those M2s. And that way, if you want your operations, you have to rezone, and it goes through a public hearing process, and you can assess all these things with intensity. But if you already are in an industrial district and you aren't actually generating externalities, you aren't generating impacts, you don't want to penalize our good neighbors, right? Our investors that are generating employment. So how can we find that balance? So it seemed to me what I heard the common denominator was when you're adjacent to residential. And then the second piece was the public hearing side of it, that you want to be able to have public notice and really examine and make sure you have all the information that you need from an applicant. So what we're proposing for you to consider is for these uses, and this is a smaller list, a shorter list than when we first came to you. But we are recommending that in the light industrial, that these uses are required to get a SLUP if they are adjacent to residential. But this is the proposition: if they're adjacent to other industrial or heavy commercial, this is saying you won't need a special land use permit. And I don't know if you agree with that, but we were looking at what is the problem you're trying to solve. The problem that we heard that needs addressing is when you're adjacent to residential, those impacts. So I'll pause there if that makes sense before we kind of go through the specific items. And again, this is the base district. This is an overlays, and you may say, just push this over to an overlay if that's needed, but this would be citywide. So if adding a special land use permit would help you, we see that would help you address some of the concerns you raised with us about some of the more intense uses that are currently allowed in industrial. It's not applied to all of the industrial uses, just those that have very intense uses, may generate noise, pollutants, or require environmental. And the good news is, and this I think was especially from, I want to say it was with Councilwoman Cobble, when we were talking about what kind of criteria you already have in the code. If anybody is an applicant has heavy industrial uses and they have to do a SLUP, they have to go through, this is only half of the requirements, but they already are supposed to require all of this analysis and documentation about their environmental impacts, and also if they've gone through state agencies. So we don't have to make up any language. What you see here is we're saying for this handful of heavier uses that we're saying future new uses, they'd have to get a SLUP, and they would have to follow that same criteria. So you were as informed as you really want to be on the nature of their operations and the potential impact.
So Michelle, you're saying that you're recommending that we leave these items on the right-hand side all in the M category. We're not moving them to M2 or heavier in the industry. It still would be in M, but only and only if these are adjacent to residential areas. When you say residential, are you talking about communities or individual houses or what?
Zoned property. Thank you. Yes, property that is zoned residential.
And so any property, so it could be one house.
Zoned residential.
Zoned residential, then they would have to get a SLUP.
Yeah. If they and again, this would be for new operations. This would not apply to existing.
Oh, okay. Get you. That makes it better.
So Michelle, is there a I guess a distance associated with this when you say adjacent to?
No, we were limiting it to your property touches residential. If you do have properties that are adjacent to residential.
Oh yeah, we know.
I know you know.
Okay.
Yeah, so we didn't establish or try to extend properties over.
Just adjacent to, okay. All right.
Yeah, the only thing that's troubling now, this is really one of those moments that I'm torn, because on one hand, I can see that we should provide for this type of growth, and we should certainly protect our communities, our residential areas from this type of growth as well, because it's just not convenient to have your house right butt up to this type of development, particularly if it wasn't there when you moved in. You moved into trees and and other sites out your back window, and now they're knocking down the trees and they're getting ready to put one of these companies up, a recycling plant for rubber and plastics. And so you're afraid of the whole notion of that. So would not some sort of, I guess, boundary or between the two, say 300 or something, a number, what's a number that would allow us to process these type developments without a SLUP, or is that even possible? That would be satisfactory, under general practices.
So instead of the SLUP, just add additional criteria like a bigger buffer.
Correct. I mean, I'm asking, is that?
Yeah. Well, it seems to be successful over on Lithonia Industrial Boulevard. You have a lot of, several intense industrial uses. They technically, you look at the boundaries, they touch it residential, but they have 300, when I measured them just roughly, GIS measurement, you have 350 feet. And there seems to be a good number where, according to what was reported, you don't have complaints from those neighbors. I don't know, I didn't verify that. This was what I was told.
Yeah.
But of course, when we brought up additional buffers, when you bring that up with the property owners and those with vested interests, they get concerned that you're taking away some of their usable property. You already have a big buffer, 100 feet on your M2s, 100 feet. So that, I can offer you those trade-offs. I do think that's a reasonable a requirement to have additional buffer. But I also heard you all saying, you know, you want to have a way for the public to be notified of new, big, impactful projects.
Change any of that. That wouldn't change that. I mean, we can have both. We don't have to have either or. And you know, my biggest concern again is to provide for a growth and development in the industrial park. We're talking about inside an industrial park as opposed to in a community. We don't, you know, communities shouldn't have to even be bothered about this, but there are certain communities that exist now that are, you know, adjacent to industrial parks, both Lithonia and Panola Road. So, you know, those communities should be protected by some sort of buffer. And if you're talking about a new construction, then certainly we should either have a buffer, whether they like it or not. You know, if they want to put their business there, you talk about a new development. They just have to deal with the buffer issue. If we can come up with a number that would be satisfactory to the community, or we'll do the slump. I mean, you know, so I mean, having a slump don't increase their chance of success for building in that community with a smaller buffer. So to me, if I was the industry, if I was a person, you know, either trying to sell property to somebody that can build on here, I would be preaching, look, let's do the buffer as opposed to going through slump. I mean, I'm just saying.
Mayor, I think that if you put the SLUP in place, then you could put those conditions in before approval, which would include buffers based on what is being proposed. So I think you can get both. Have the SLUP, during the SLUP process, you add whatever condition you feel is necessary to protect the community.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I mean, I don't think one or the other satisfies both needs. I think doing them together. So to Georgia or Councilman Turner's point, I don't think you take the SLUP away. I think for me, that's a no-brainer. I mean, I'm all the way team SLUP on this particular point. But I don't see the harm in then, like you said, going back in and saying, okay, well, here's the requirement, and you can adjust that number, whether it's 200 feet, 300 feet, 100, whatever it is. You can adjust that based on, you know, the application that's in front of you or in front of staff. But I would not take away the SLUP.
I mean, I'm good with that. You know, with what both you guys saying. The thing about it is that with the SLUP, you know, I think these companies won't have a fighting chance, which they may not deserve. I mean, you know, I'm not saying they do, but I'm just saying if we're really considering the growth issue, we got to come up with some sort of middle ground to help make this work. And on top of that, here's the more important point, is that when you look at the map of the city of Stonecrest and you look at available land for growth for any of these industry, that number is not that big. That it's not a big number. So you're not talking about like a big deal here, because where you find available land in an industrial park next to a community is I don't know if Michelle, you guys have done that. But I guarantee you that's not a lot of miles, not even a lot of acres that's available like that. So, you know, for that reason alone, I'm not too concerned about this, because we're not talking about a big deal of items that will come forth. But at the same time, I do want to provide for some sort of reasonable growth. But what you provided here, Michelle, though, is really great, because now, you know, we can move these items between categories. Like there may be some that's in this right-hand column that could move back over to the left-hand corner, and it could be workable, you know. So I don't know which one that would be. Maybe even a vehicle storage yard. Maybe that would be less harmful, less aggressive. You know, it wouldn't require a SLUP as opposed to the recycling rubber plant or something like that. So we can look at these individuals and move them back and forth, I think.
Well,
Yeah,
I think one thing
The
too should be
idea was,
considered- I'm sorry, Michelle. I think one
ahead.
thing should be considered the residents. I mean, we've been talking about these businesses coming in and economic development. That's all well and good, but they should have a place to do that. Our first responsibility is to the protection of the residents that we serve. And I know a SLUP would do that. And then within that SLUP, there are also conditions and requirements that has to happen. And if they don't follow those or they don't come up with them, then they probably need to move in another area. But we cannot allow a situation like the Metro Green situation to happen again. I mean, we need to learn. They say history is our teacher, and we need to learn from that and move forward with that SLUP and put things in place that protects the community, and then the economy will be developed from that point, I believe.
And that's why this process is so important, because with the Metro Greens, since we named the name, I was going out the way not to name anybody, but with with the development like that, we can simply, that would have been addressed in the overlay. So we could have made an overlay restriction that would have taken care of that. And the rest of these companies don't have to suffer because of what happened with that one particular company. But I agree with you 100%. That's why I started the conversation about talking about the buffering, because you have to buffer these companies from these certain of these companies from the rest of the community. So, and that's why I said on purpose, come up with a number that will work, because it may not. For instance, all of us in our mind could say 1,000 feet from the nearest neighborhood would definitely work, but it's not. That's not going to work for the company, because they may not have that much land to build on when you look at 1,000 feet. So we do know there's a number that will work for neighborhoods, and if that number could also work for industry, then we're doing both at the same time. We're protecting the neighborhoods and we're providing for growth. And again, it's on a limited number of parcels throughout the city. So we're not talking about a big deal here,
But I think that would be assuming a lot, as you know what's going to come. Whereas you may put in a buffer that is really not necessary, or you might not put in enough buffer based on what is being planned. So I think you lock yourself in if you put it in advance. I think the SLUP is going to be your best bet to get what you need, when you need it, where you need it.
That's fine, and I agree. I don't have a problem. Again, just to be perfectly clear, I do not have a problem with the SLUP, which goes back to my point prior to this, was that when you look at this set, we're just talking about what's on the screen right now. All of these are M's right now. And so what we're basically saying is take part of these M's and move them over to requiring them to have a SLUP. So we can look at the list on the right-hand side, and maybe you guys are, I don't know, maybe the community or some of the people online, if they want to, if you're listening or whatever, you can send in an email and see what companies on the right-hand side that you think would be better served, or say zero. So none of them should be moved back to the left. And there might be some company on the left that actually might need moving over to the right. So, but we have an opportunity to look at that as well.
yeah.
So,
And just to clarify, so the ones on the left are expanding your list. It was recognizing, there's things that you might want to, that you should allow by right, if you want the light industrial to have as much opportunity, especially if you're going to put any constraints. And the SLUP criteria is just for these. There's a lot of other uses a property owner can choose. These are just the set that we are recommending require a SLUP. And to your point, Councilman Clinton, there's not a lot of parcels that are still adjacent to industrial. There's not that many impacted. And it's only those that would be required to get a SLUP, according to this recommendation.
Councilwoman Grimes got locked out. Councilwoman Grimes, you?
No, I just thought I was on mute. I was saying the cemetery concerns me. I'm sorry.
Okay, we can move on.
So sounds like you'll want some feedback or on the specific list that we had looked at for their impact of requiring a special land use permit, and adding and looking at adding buffers to these intense uses. I think it was a good point that not all of the light industrial need more than a 75-foot buffer that they currently have because they don't generate that kind of noise or other impacts or air impacts. But to propose a buffer that makes sense for these intense uses in addition to the SLEP. Did I capture that?
Good for me.
Yep, I think you got it.
So we had a handful of other uses, but we're not going to, you've seen these all before. I just separated them out this time to be a little, so you could focus a little bit. Similarly to the light industrial, we heard the concern about making sure when a gas station comes in that you get what you really want. And so we are recommending you require a SLUP for all of these uses. Currently, you have an exemption if they meet a certain criterion. They don't have to get a SLUP. They can build by right. So you already have some design standards on the books. There are some design standards, but we just heard from you all and also from the community and as well as your planning commission that they would like to see a way to control and make decisions site by site. We recommend adding, addressing how your bed and breakfast is different than your short-term rental, what people call Airbnb. We are looking at adding the requirement for having owner occupied if you're going to allow bed and breakfast establishments. And that if you want to consider them in residential, you'd have to have fewer than 10 rooms. Again, the owner would have to be present and they would be required to get a special land use permit. Any response on these two kind of uses?
Yeah, it's me again.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, let's start with the bed and breakfast in the short term. I do think there should be a distinction between the two. That's easy. That's
Okay.
the easy part. The hard part is this: on the bed and breakfast, owner occupied. That makes sense, but I don't think, and I'm hoping that you're not saying that's the same for the short-term vacation rentals.
That what we're saying here, if you for short-term vacation rentals, would require a special land use permit in your residential districts.
Okay, that's fine, I guess. I mean, neighbors should know when there's an Airbnb coming to a particular neighborhood. In residential districts, but I would like for us to look into like some of the other bigger cities and like what's happening in Savannah is to provide for the growth of these Airbnb type or short-term rental, vacation rental properties in the city of Stonecrest, either by districts, by some kind of use district or some method that we don't put these in the category of always requiring a SLUP, because it's that would mean that it just depends on the climate at that time and on that day, whether or not, a Airbnb can move into or STVR can move into the city of Stonecrest. So I do think we should preserve some space for it, particularly if we're looking for the type of growth that we're projecting, which is there's a particular attraction to Arabian Mountain, for instance, and there's a particular attraction that will be coming for what's in George Turner District, Councilman Turner's district, the kayaking, so when you start having these type of attractions, you make this city a destination city of a sort. And then when we look at the build out that we're projecting at the mall with all the convention rooms and that kind of stuff, this will provide an alternative for that as well. So we should have or provide for Airbnbs, but what we should never provide for is any kind of build out within a residential district that would seems like it's not part of the residential district. In other words, Airbnbs within a residential district should look just like any other home. There should not be increased parking. There should not be people on grass. There should not be any kind of inconvenience, trash left beside the road. It should look like any other house or better. Same thing with daycares and that types of uses inside a residential district. It should look like a home. Nobody in that neighborhood should know that that's a daycare. Not by the abundance of cars parked outside or anything else that would be inconvenience or unattractive to those neighborhoods. So those are the things I think we should provide for in the zoning ordinances, which would require a bit of a more of a workload for our code enforcement officers, because that will be where we would enforce this stuff from. And so if when we start requiring certain things of these type build outs, then we're going to have to require certain things of our code enforcement so we can stay on top of it. And so we can have a hotline, for instance, where neighbors can call in residential districts where these things exist. So I would be good with a SLUP inside a residential district as long as we provide for growth outside of the residential district. That are for both Airbnbs STVRs and or B&Bs.
So right in C1 or any of the non-residential.
Say that one more time, Michelle. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
So allow them by right in other districts, the non-residential districts. Allow them by right.
Yeah, or create a district.
So that.
Yeah, create something that will promote the growth in a reasonable and in a fashion that can be regulated easily outside of residential district, but inside of residential districts, we can require the SLUP. That way we are not Xing out Airbnbs in the city of Stonecrest without a SLUP, which I don't think we should ever move in that arena because it's just dangerous.
Okay, so help me understand. In what scenario would a bed and breakfast and a short-term vacation rental not be residential?
You talking to me or just
somebody?
Okay, in my opinion, my opinion is that it goes in the same vein as the OITs, where you have homes and spaces that are transitioning to office space. And the same way with these Airbnbs is where, instead of those transition, for instance, into office space, maybe somebody want to come in and put an Airbnb in that space. That would be Airbnb year round. I mean, we just went on vacation not too long ago in Miami, Florida. And I'm telling you, if it wasn't for Airbnbs, we couldn't accommodate the trip, as we took an entire family trip there, and it really works out good because the entire house is Airbnb 100% of the time throughout the year. It's never owner occupied at any point in time. And the most of the homes in that area was also Airbnb. So it's almost like they I don't know whether they specified some space where these Airbnbs can exist. And if you exist within that space, you don't have to get a SLUP. But if you're outside of that space, you do. So, right now we may not have that space. But what I'm saying is we should, plan for having that type of space as we grow out. And then also it protects our residential districts in that, you can still have an Airbnb in the residential districts, but you would have to get a SLUP. That way you can have an owner-occupied Airbnb where people have basements and their entire basement is an Airbnb, but they live upstairs, which is really, it's not unusual.
So the on the question of what's the scenario, so if you're going to make it your business, if it's not going to be your home and you're not going to have, your neighbor, you're not a neighborhood, but you want to profit and have Airbnb, you'd be zoned C1, for example. You could have a house structure. You could have what might look like more of a small or boutique hotel concept, but you'd be zoned as a commercial district. And that would be appropriate because it's not a residential use. It's a dedicated property for the business of Airbnbs. I don't know if Chris or Nikki had any other clarification.
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to do is when we say designate between bed and breakfast and short-term vacation rental, or what people call Airbnb, is we're saying there should be two categories. One of them should be owner occupied, which is what we're calling bed and breakfast. So that would be the situation like Councilman Clayton was talking about, where you have a house and your basement is a rental unit that you rent out on a basis, but you're there. You as the homeowner are present for that. The issue that we often have with Airbnbs is when the owner is not present. So we're saying if you want to have an entire house in a residential district that's going to be an Airbnb, the owner's not going to be there, that needs a slub. If you want to have an Airbnb in a commercial district where the owner's not going to be there, that should be allowed. So it's kind of like separating it into two categories. The owner's either present or the owner's not present. And that's really the biggest factor in what makes these different and when a slub should be required and when it's not.
Nikki, what you just explained, I agree 100% with. That's exactly what I was trying to articulate. Thanks.
Yeah.
No problem. So do we need to make that C1 or that designation under, or that use, I guess, under commercial use?
Yeah, so we'll have two uses in the use table. One of them will be this short-term rental and one of them is Airbnb. You actually already have them in the use table. We're just going to make sure that those definitions are clear, which one is which, and then that those uses where SLUPs are required and where they're permitted to have them. So in commercial districts like C1, C2, maybe O and I. I'll have to look at O and I and see what we decided on that. But in those districts and your mixed use districts also are important in this sense. That's where Airbnbs would be permitted, the short-term rentals. Where they're not is where you need in the residential districts where you're in your subdivisions, R100, R85, R75, R60, where you have traditional, suburban neighborhoods. Those would need a SLUP. So it'll be laid out in the use table. Hope that.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, this should be pretty quick. We're recommending the cell tower. This is a big, thick set of regulations. The federal government has really removed any of our local government control over cell towers. There's very little. It's no longer really a land use question. We're checking with legal. If there's any implications, I know in other jurisdictions, they don't have cell tower in their zoning code. We're just asked to remove it to make it, again, make your zoning code a little more manageable. Child daycare, we are recommending we just line up our definitions with the state. That's the short of it. And we want to just be clear about what's allowed and what needs a home occupation, what it's considered for home occupation.
Yeah, that one is a real good one. I know Councilman George Turner is going to have something to chime in on that because right now it's not clear, crystal clear, I should say, whether or not the homeowner need to also be on the property or not. So I'll circle back around to that one, or I'll just let that go. That's my own input on that. But going back up to the wireless communication, I think that it's great to remove that from our regulations. However, I do think that, on a sidebar or a side note, that we certainly should add language to our website or somewhere to educate the public on where our responsibility lies and where it ends at in regards to these cell towers. And so that, again, that City of Stonecrest don't get massacred over something that we don't have really, we don't control, so.
Yeah, it will still be in your charter, your code. It just won't be in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Just to be clear, we have still some rules, and the city will still have some review, but we're just saying, let's make it its own chapter and move it out of the zoning code. So if I wasn't.
So moving it out of the zoning code. Okay, so we just won't provide the zoning information that technically may or may not conflict with the federal government is saying. Is there some concern there?
No, it's just clarifying. Some cities have the cell tower in their zoning code, and some cities just have the cell tower rules as under their building permits or just as a standalone code. And it's a large document. It's a large set of regulations. So we're recommending that you definitely keep the code. We're not saying get rid of the wireless code, but let's just move it out of zoning because it's really no longer related to land use. It's really a straightforward building permitting review process. It's more the engineer submits their drawings and makes their case, and it's more of a technical review than anything that a land use. So we're
okay.
Streamline your zoning.
Yeah.
It'd still be a code, but not in the zoning section.
Same difference, and which goes to regardless, particularly now, if we move out the zoning, which is probably should have never been in there in the first place, and we leave it in the ordinances, but then we need to add an explanation to the website as to what the city's role is with cell towers, so that the community is very, very clear on this.
Okay. I mean, so you're saying move it out of zoning, but move it into where again?
As an independent chapter in your code. We'll work with the city attorney to see where the best location in the rest of your code makes sense. Typically it'd be under building or one of those subsections.
Okay. And the conflicting language with the child daycare, what's conflicting about it?
Well, I was referring to where I think on a number of occasions you had mentioned that, there was some concern whether or not it should be owner occupied or, the owner have to live on the property where the daycare is or not. I think we had that conversation a couple of times during some of our meetings.
I think that might be.
I think the conflict was in owner operator.
Owner operator, right.
Yeah. Is that the same person? And in
Right,
my
exactly.
understanding, it is.
It's an either or.
Yeah.
Owner or the operator, because sometimes the operator is a renter.
And that's what
Either
personally, but I think we have to deal with that as an ordinance, because when I suggested it, I was not considering a renter as being the operator, but as the owner. But that's something that we're going to have to discuss whether or not it's legal to say that.
And maybe we could say
The
resident.
rest of the council agrees with that.
Well, I think you know my stance. I certainly know. I think it should be the way it's written on either or. I think it should be either or.
Well, I don't think it solves the issue that we were having. Is that we had an issue in DeKalb County before we became a city, whereas people would buy up a number of houses and just rent them out for this purpose. And there's just running businesses in a residential neighborhood. And it was becoming, and it is an issue with some subdivisions. So I think that is one we need to visit outside of what we're doing right now and make sure it becomes a part of this. Because it's gonna take some serious dialogue and making sure that we are on legal footing to say what we want to say as a council. Because I know, Councilman Clanton and I have different views on it, but I think as a council, we need to come up with what our position is going to be.
So what is the difference? One of you is saying you don't have to reside there to be an operator. And
You,
Well, no,
you can
yeah,
reside there, but you can reside there as a renter versus
right,
as an owner.
so
exactly.
you're saying, so there, that sounds like then you are saying the same thing? Is that?
No,
No.
basically,
No, they're saying one
Yeah.
person, one of them saying you have to own the house, and the other one saying you can rent the house and still run this business.
right. 'Cause
Currently, as the code is written, you can be the owner of the property and live there, or you can be a renter,
and live there.
operate the child care center and live there.
Correct. See, and to me, the more important point is live there. So whether
Yeah.
you're the owner or the renter, as long as you live there, you can have the daycare. But neither owner nor renter can have a daycare there if they do not live there. That's what I'm saying.
And,
Okay.
and I
And
think
that's
in order to satisfy that, we need to put it to council as a vote
Well,
and
the code
decide
is already written for that.
and see if it will hold up to legal.
The code is already written to require them to live there because it's under home occupation. In order to have a home occupation, the primary use has to be as a residence, which means someone has to live there. So that's what's currently in the code.
Okay. So it's really just the numbers then, the types of numbers, Nikki, that we're cleaning up?
Yeah, so how it's written right now, it leaves you open to allowing people to apply for childcare learning centers, which is 7 or more children in a residential district. You would need a SLUP. So we're saying that shouldn't be allowed. It should only be up to 6 children for any residential district. If you want to have a center, you have to be in a commercial district.
I agree. Yeah.
7 or more. So it's just, and it's just like a weird loophole that we just want to close is pretty much what's.
May I-
Yeah. That
May
so
I ask-
far nobody took advantage of.
Yeah, so we're gonna clean it up real quick. So
May I ask one question? And this may not be your concern, Michelle, but I'm a numbers person. And so
I'm
if
sorry.
you say up to
Did you
for
say?
the child care, for the child daycare down at the bottom.
Yeah.
So in the private residence, it says up to 6. So that means 6 is included. But in the child care learning center, it says more than 7. So that means 7 is not included. It's 8. So where does the number 7 fall?
Good one.
it says 7 or more in the code.
Okay,
Sorry,
see,
that's just the type.
right here, it says more than 7, the way it's written here, what I'm looking at.
Yeah, sorry. That's just
That's an error.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Oh, okay. I'm
you.
sorry. I wasn't looking to catch errors. I'm just
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'm serious. Thank you. I mean, this gets published and we don't want to have miscommunication. So thank you. All right, let's see, almost done with these. So your staff gets a number of requests for these 2 different services. One is a towing service and another is non-emergency medical transport. We just wanted to clean some of that up about requirements and be specific because these tend to become code enforcement issues. So these aren't major changes. They're just trying to clean up and specify so staff doesn't have to do gymnastics when trying to enforce the intent of the code. These 3, one brewery winery. So there are it's already allowed in your use table. We just wanted to clean up where the make sure they were in the appropriate districts, and then also add some clarification about regulating micro producers in a similar way to allow them in places that you know that makes sense. The hookah and cigar lounge. So we didn't see that you all necessarily have this coming in, but we see it around the region. We see it all over the rest of DeKalb County. The requests for hookah lounges and requests for cigar lounges, both are having tobacco consumption on site. So we just wanted you to have something on the books when they do start coming to your town.
Well, I have one. I do have one in my district.
And
You
I
do
think
have
I have one in my district.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if you have feedback, if they're running fine and,
As a matter of fact, the one in my district is going to be giving away Christmas gifts in a couple of weeks. So they're getting involved in the community. No problems with them thus far.
good citizens.
Yeah, they're here to stay.
So we just wanted to clarify about adding them, as a specific use. There are rules by the state and there are rules by the county about, prohibitions about, some of their uses. So we just looked at them as really needing to be similar to being allowed similar to a late night because of the age restrictions. So even if they don't want to sell alcohol, there's still that age restriction issue. And then the other is that it's to check with you if there's a tobacco retail. So is it okay for y'all if the store that's just selling product is also allowing consumption on site? And we get mixed messages from different communities, whether you feel that's okay or not. So we wanted to check in with you on that, thumbs up or thumbs down.
So you're talking about cigars?
It could be cigars or it could be hookah paraphernalia.
I think both should
You
be.
do consumption on site. The
Yeah.
question is to have consumption on site. Are you okay with having a lounge in a store that sells tobacco?
Yeah, in the case of a cigar bar, truly. Also, the same thing with hookahs. Yeah, I think certainly we should have the lounge. I think we should be ready to move in that arena. Into that arena, I should say.
If they don't have a bar, if they just are allowing consumption on site, do you care?
If they don't have a bar, as in an alcohol bar?
Correct. So if they
Yeah,
just
of
are,
course. Yes, as in the case of a cigar bar. They're not necessarily, some do have alcohol, but I do know some that do not have alcohol as well. Same thing with hookah. I think we would be providing for a safer atmosphere, as a matter of fact.
without alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, and in particular where I don't know. That's my opinion. That's just personal.
Yeah,
personal.
that's what
But
we're
I'm
checking your
good
pulse.
with whatever council is good with on this case.
If I may say something, I know of one where they're smoking on the concrete, which is in the strip mall. Now, they have a nice lounge on the inside, but I guess because of COVID, they may be coming out to smoke. So should we think about what the outside consumption looks like? Because for me, and it's my personal opinion, when I want to go get my hair cut, I don't want my hair to smell like tobacco, but I have to go through the hookah crew and the cigar crew to get to the barbershop if I'm going to go to that barbershop. So I just think maybe we might need to just think about what the consumption on site looks like, because of course we have to take into consideration COVID now. So maybe they don't want to be inside, smoked up, not
Right.
masked up, but
What's going to kill you, the tobacco or the?
right. So I'm just wondering, where do we put those concerns about how
Okay.
that looks? Because sitting in front of the doorway in the strip mall, that's not, to me, that doesn't look like the appropriate consumption on site. To be outside on the backside, if there's a patio or a couple of chairs with umbrellas or tables or deck or something.
Some order to it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually in the state law. They can't be within a certain distance of another business. So we can look into that.
Code
That's
enforcement.
enforceable. Yeah, I think it's like 100 feet. Actually, it's pretty strict. That they, you can't smoke anything within 100 feet of a business now. It's a state law. So we can look into that and make that enforceable for you.
Gotcha.
I'm also looking at the age requirement. Is this an assumption that this will be a bar that sells alcohol? It says Georgia prohibits indoor smoking except for bars and restaurants that deny access to any person under the age of 18. And the legal age of consumption is 21. Is Is there something conflicting about this?
It's just the state. I couldn't answer that.
Yeah, so that's just the state law prohibits indoor smoking for anyone unless there's an age restriction for the establishment. Now there just recently was a state law passed that to buy tobacco you have to be 21.
Okay.
So that's the state law there.
So just wrapping up, then that's the last of it. We're gonna put some provisions in so people who want to put solar panels in, have provisions. We currently don't have anything specific. So we hit a certain finish line. We have some homework, but we got some direction. You've been so generous with your time. This has been so helpful.
Michelle,
Any last comments?
before you wrap up, I know this was for council, and we did have some stakeholders who said they wanted to have a couple of words. And I told them I tried to squeeze them in because at one point we did open this up for the public input. And I hope we have covered all the concerns that they might have, but I would like to give them a minute, maybe two, to at least say one or two things if they still are on the line and still have concerns that we might have missed something that is critical. So I know of three of them, and I would like to just point to them right now. And one is Ms. Cheryl Mathis, that you have anything, if she's still on the line, that you think we might have missed in this conversation? Is she gone?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, quickly, please.
Well, thank you, Councilman Turner. Actually, I'm pleased with what I've heard tonight and don't have anything to add. I was concerned more or less about the overlays and what we discussed, but I believe you've covered most of it. I just know that there was some more language that we had, which may have already been covered, but for the most part, I'm pleased.
Thank you very much. You represent
Well, I represent the Klondike Area Civic Association as well as the Chaparral Woods subdivision.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Bernard Knight is also on the line. Mr. Knight, you satisfied that we covered most of your concerns?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I very much appreciate the opportunity to, first of all, watch this presentation, this workshop, and also that you called on me. It's my understanding that Ms. Alexander and Ms. Washington will be scheduling meetings separately with the business alliance and industrial stakeholders to discuss what she has presented tonight, and of course those opportunities will be greatly appreciated. The only thing that I'd want to specifically point to now is to support the idea of a community council, or perhaps more than one community council for the city of Stonecrest. I often, over the years, appeared in front of the District 5 Community Council, especially when it was chaired by Councilman Turner back in the day. And I want to tell you that it worked really well, in my opinion, that it was composed of residents and they cared about what they were doing. And it was a great opportunity for everybody, both applicants as well as residents, to really have a dialogue. And frankly, I always thought that it worked a lot better than the so-called community meetings, which developers were also required to present as part of that process, and which still have to be done here in Stonecrest. So yes, I think that's a great idea to go back to the community council system. You might want to consider actually having more than one, perhaps break them down by non-residential versus residential, by function, that sort of thing. But that would be up to y'all. But I for one would certainly welcome that. I think it would help get the word out to everybody, and there would be less of a chance of everybody being surprised when the bulldozers show up in their backyards, which is always terrible.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Council, was there anyone else that you had committed to have a word?
Yes, sir. Mr. Dave Marcus, if he has not left the call.
Please, briefly, sir.
I am still here and have been in rapt fascination. This has been a long process, and I appreciate the detail that you have gone into, and also the collaborative groups bending over backwards to address your concerns. I'm very satisfied with everything I've heard here tonight, very pleased with it, but I'd like to make 3 comments. The first is in support of having notification published in the legal organ for rezonings, variances, and SLUPs. And I might add demolition permits and land disturbance permits. One of the reasons for that is that our legal organ does send a summary email every day of stories, including legal notices. And that provides a way for people to get notices in their personal email box. And I would assume that the cost of those would be borne by the person doing the application. So I'd like to just go on record as support for that. Second, without saying anything about it, I too support the community council concept. They have worked well in DeKalb. Third, regarding Stonecrest Overlay Tier 5, specifically Plunkett Road, where it is very near to Rockland, behind the Arabia Alliance office and more or less across the street from Waters Farm. I was a member of the Arabia Overlay Committee as well as the Parks Committee, and we all had concerns about potential uses in that very short, I want to call it a long block of Plunkett that would be visible from Waters Farm and would basically detract from the attractiveness of that natural area. And I would be very much in support of removing that from Tier 5 and leaving the underlying R100 zoning.
Thank you. Okay.
One more, I have Kelly Jordan, and that's it I won't have anybody else.
Mr. Jordan, you have a word?
Thank you, Councilmember Grimes, and what do we call you, the Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Turner. I'm going to just quickly echo both Cheryl Mathes's comments that we're generally impressed and pleased with the thorough level of discussion, but I'm going to hone in on what Dave Marcus just said about the Tier 5 and the additional uses by right that can be introduced to R100. We as the Alliance have a lot of concern about that, and going to definitely take a hard look at whether that really should be permitted there. We were a little caught surprised and appreciate the collaborative firm pointing out that large number of uses that are permitted by right. I don't think we all had really picked up on that. So as the Alliance trying to preserve the setting that everybody values there, we're going to take an interest in seeing if that could either be removed from the Stonecrest overlay or in line with what Councilman Clanton said, those uses revised. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wheeler, will you announce the meetings that are coming up?
Yes, sir. So again, the only meeting that we have scheduled right now is the December 9th meeting with the Homeowners Association leaders. Again, we've emailed them specifically a list that was provided by Adrian and Mr. Al Franklin to have a meeting with the collaborative and staff itself to discuss the presentation, which you guys just went through, to get their feedback. Hopefully they have been registering and signing up for it. So again, if you know anybody who's a HOA president or a leader, please reach out to staff to let us know who they are so we can get them the link and then they can sign up to have a meeting with us next week.
And Michelle, you'll tell us about the meeting with the other stakeholders that you have planned.
Sure. So we had reached out and asked for a third meeting with the industrial group. And we reached out to the Business Alliance to see if they'd be available for another meeting to walk through essentially what we walked through this evening. Mm-hmm.
And those are going to happen.
Great. Thank you. Did I miss anything? Announcements? relative to what we're doing now. Okay, Michelle, you want to have the closing words?
Thank you, everybody, for all of the comments and insights and direction. Just want to let the audience know to check the planning and zoning webpage. There is a dedicated webpage for the update where we have recordings of these presentations and fact sheets, and we'll be posting documents. So if you can't make it or you want to share and get your neighbors alerted and informed, that website's a great resource. And thank you again, everybody. This has been so helpful, and thank you for all your dedication and time.
Excellent, thank you. I believe that's it, good folks. Good night. Thank you all for tuning in.
Right away.
Good night.
Now, in order to before election day, find out more